What's up? Good evening, everybody. Are we on? There we go. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us at this special meeting of the Madera City Council. Today's Thursday, April 4th, 6 p.m. If we can have roll call, please.
Mayor Andrew Medellin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Steve Montes.
Here.
Councilmember Cece Gallegos.
Here.
Councilmember Jose Rodriguez. Absent. Councilmember Derek Robinson Sr.
Present.
Councilmember Santos Garcia.
Hello.
Councilmember Donald Hawley.
Present.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And just as a note, Councilman Rodriguez just called moments ago to our city manager, and he has a family emergency. So we will be thinking about him and his family and sending him our thoughts and our prayers. And hope that everything will be fine with his family. With that, if you'll stand with me, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first 15 minutes are reserved for members of the audience wishing to speak on items that are within the subject jurisdiction. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak under public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and move right into why we are here. Item E1, this is consideration of a minute order accepting a report on the status of the proposed projects in the City of Madera Draft Capital Improvement Program for fiscal year 2019-2022, fiscal year 2023-2024. Mr. Helmuth, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, we're here tonight to go ahead and look at the CIP as it stands at this preliminary stage. As I go through this, there's a fair number of slides in here, so feel comfortable in asking questions whenever you'd like. We do have I'm calling it an intermission/questions section about midway through it, so you'll be able to go ahead and save your questions up. But if you have a question that can't wait, please ask. So, starting off with capital improvement program. What is a capital improvement program? It's a multi-year planning document used by the city to identify capital improvement projects and coordinate the financing and timing of the projects. The CIP is a 5-year plan that identifies projects, priorities, and financing. The CIP is subject to change for a variety of reasons. Council prioritization, we may see that tonight on certain projects. Everything is up for grabs in terms of comments and prioritization. Funding changes. Funding does periodically change. We sometimes change the color of the money to go ahead and accelerate one project versus another. Staffing availability, project delays, working through design, right-of-way acquisition, etc. Emergency needs. I've put up here a couple examples. Schnorr sewer repairs. A few years ago, we had a sinkhole on Schnorr Avenue where a pipe gave way, and we had to go ahead and take care of that very quickly. What we did on that was we shut down the portion of the street, we called in a contractor, and we moved forward with that repairs, and we started working on more permanent repairs for other sections of the pipe. Because after it failed, we looked back at our pictures of the sewer, and it did not show that the sewer was subject to failure, but a few years later, turns out it was. So we moved forward with that. That project actually was the impetus for doing sewer and water assessments that are ongoing right now, because we don't want to have that type of thing happen again. Other things, grants preparation, grant awards with short allowable delivery times. CDBG is the topic of the day. Washington sidewalks is one of them, and our recent applications that are going through the application process right now. CIP is adopted at the same time as the city budget. Right now, something changed here. Right now, the CIP is that you see it is in draft form. It's subject to change. The CIP is annually appropriated, again coinciding with the city budget process. General plan conformity, I'm not going to read all of this, but basically state law says that anything with our CIP has to be in conformity with our general plan. It can't be something where you're going to go ahead and build something completely different than your general plan. The law states that we need to conform, and we need to go to the Planning Commission for their agreement that it does conform to the general plan. Project categories, there are a multitude here, I believe it's 8. We have airport with taxiways, runways, community development such as a new city hall or expansion, engineering, all the things that you typically see coming out of engineering, a new fire department, or excuse me, a new fire station, parks and community services, a number of projects there, bike facilities, river trails, public works, sewer, water meters, etc., RDA successor projects. Right now there's a project that we're looking to go ahead and put on streets with Adele, just utilities. We're taking what was a full road design, stripping out the utilities and moving that forward with the RDA funding, or successor agency funding. And then transit, the transit building's under construction at the moment. Some of the guiding documents that we follow, well, we have the general plan. That's one primary document. We also have a vision plan. The vision speaks to one of the things that we are following, see some of the projects, is a walkable, bikeable community. That's something that we consider important, and we're moving towards that. Specific plans, those usually get into more detail in areas around town, talking about how development occur in a subdivision or an area part of town. Madera County Transportation Commission, within the last year or so, they came up with an active transportation program. That was the result of working with community members, identifying areas where they saw that that we needed to go ahead and put in sidewalks or bike lanes, or where we basically had accessibility issues with regard to any number of reasons. Getting to school, a person in a wheelchair trying to get past a particular point. And if I remember when we get there, I'm going to point out a problem that we had on Howard Road that's specifically addressed in this. Also, staff review of current needs and available new funding sources. Many of the needs are related to progressive growth. Typically, what we want to go ahead and see is that development is paying its way, but that's not always possible. So the CIP looks to address other projects that assist in doing that. If there's a deficiency in the system, our CIP identifies it and hopefully moves the project forward to take care of it. Internal discussions on priorities, schedules, and funding, maintenance and other requests. Public Works has a number of maintenance things that they do on a regular basis. Anything that rises to a fairly large cost can go into the CIP for planning, for budgeting, whatever we see it need be. And then risk assessments. If we see a risk out there that represents a need for the community, that can help in putting it into a CIP. All our CIP projects are funded through non-general fund sources. Some cities do use general fund. The city of Madera has historically or traditionally, since I've been here, not used general fund sources. So what we do use are special revenue funds, gas taxes, RSTP, Measure T, Measure K, the recent bond measure from the state, SB1, Senate bill from the state, enterprise funds, the water, sewer, storm coming from rates, impact fees, transit sources. They have a number of sources that are helping and assisting in building the transit facility. Airport sources, which includes the FAA grant program, and then other regional or local sources, grants, RDA, successor agency funds, and then other funds beyond that. In the staff report, you'll see about 2 pages of possible funding sources that we work from. Commissions review, make recommendations to City Council. Sometimes commissions assist in providing projects. The CDBG committee, they make recommendations. Then ultimately, City Council, the CIP. This CIP staff session represents Council's opportunity to provide guidance or direction to staff. If you see anything in here that you disagree with or you think should be reprioritized, let us know, and we'll work towards that. Ultimately, the approval occurs during the budget process. Again, this is preliminary, but what we get here, we take towards the budget approval process. Some projects are created and funded outside the city budget in the calendar process. So while you see a number of projects here, there can be others that come forward. For instance, the AHSC grant. I'm going to go ahead and talk about that a little bit later. But if we're awarded that grant, we'll be coming back to council separately to go ahead and set up the funding sources for that. It'll be a grant fund, but we'll set that up and we'll come to council separately to go ahead and get that built into our munis or financial system. Regardless of the direction received here, staff is seeking the authorization to submit the projects to the Planning Commission for conformity. Okay, now working into the CIP itself. We have, starting off with major road and capacity enhancing projects. Right now, our #1 project is Olive Avenue. And as I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago or so, it looks like underground utilities and structures will occur first during summer of 2019. You'll see buildings start to come down. You'll see utilities going underground. And then construction in the spring of 2020 when we get all that out of the way. Generally speaking, road projects, we try to go ahead and make those occur during dry weather. The fire station's a prime example of you want to move forward with something, wet weather can get in the way. It delays you. It doesn't necessarily cost you money, but it can very definitely has the possibility of doing that. Lake Street widening. We were working on that a few years ago, and as we were working through the environmental process on that, it became quite apparent that we had, I think, 13 houses that might need to come down. We were talking about shifting the roadway to the east because of sound issues and various other different things. So the project started to become very expensive and would slow down dramatically as a result of trying to go ahead and purchase those 13 houses and work with the property owners. Working through that, it became apparent that Olive Avenue was probably the higher priority. We came back to council and looked for direction, and council said, go ahead and look to Olive Avenue.
On that, Keith, if
Yes.
you don't mind, the Lake Street widening, that was based on future growth in that particular, it wasn't necessarily just traffic, was it growth in that area? Because there's also the Cleveland 6-lane widening project that I thought in that particular area with retail might have been a higher priority. And actually it was less money.
Lake Street goes back a number of years. It's actually been anticipated since I think the 50s or 60s. It's actually in Madera Municipal Code. So we knew it was there, and at some point in time that rose to the surface. That was early in my tenure here that it came up. But even as we worked into it, we had what we do to prioritize and look at future projects is we look at the regional transportation model that's maintained by the Madera County Transportation Commission. So at one time, the model showed quite a few projects around town. Yeah. But then as we went into the recession, the State Finance Department, the DOF, Department of Finance, they started looking at the growth projections for everywhere in the state of California. So they looked at, one of the places they looked at was Madera, and they determined that Madera wasn't going to grow as fast. And those numbers migrate into the model. And when they started working through the model, it started showing that we didn't have needs for some projects. And even now I'm looking at Lake Street, and I'm not seeing major amounts of traffic on it for two scenarios they looked at, 2030 and 2042. I believe it's 2042, the last one around I've seen. And it's not saying dramatically that you need to do that project. So as I work through here, I'm going to go ahead and give council some options in terms of what they'd like to see. But Lake Street, yeah, it was out there for a while, and quite frankly, I can't remember why it came to the foray, but it did.
Yeah, that's kind of was my question, and then I don't want to get into the weeds too much because I'm sure you'll get there, but then the roundabout at Lake and Fourth and Clinton, I believe it is I'm sure is included in the same project. Two separate projects, but...
Two separate projects, and we can talk more detail about that. I haven't gone deep into that, but
yeah, okay.
I'm prepared to talk about it.
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about, we can talk about. And Lake Forest Central, that roundabout, it's a roundabout versus traffic signal. Right now, it's looking like a traffic signal, but we'll go ahead and.
We'll get into the weeds a little bit later. My apologies.
I'm trying to remember whether I've actually got it highlighted in here right now, so don't forget that.
No, I won't. It's highlighted in mine as well.
Okay, good. Okay, so Pine Street. Pine Street was actually planned to be part of the 4th Street construction. As many of you recall, we started with 4th Street and we went from Lake all the way to Pine.
Nice catch.
We went from Lake all the way to Pine. We were planning on taking Pine to Howard Road. But as we were working through that design, we couldn't come to an understanding with the Union Pacific Railroad on the spur through there. They want more room than they wanted more room than we could go ahead and use. So what we were left with was a project that couldn't be constructed. We couldn't come to a conclusion with them. Since that time, Pine Street, we've determined there is additional right-of-way on the east side of the street, but it's on the other side of the residential fences through there. Now we can move forward with that project, but I'm not suggesting here tonight that we do that. I don't necessarily see enough traffic on that street to move forward. What I think about Pine Street is Pine Street and Howard needs to be addressed first. Typically, when you're looking at streets and urban situations, as you start to urbanize and you start installing traffic signals, the street itself starts to move a little bit to the back seat in terms of the capacity thing. You still need to move traffic down through the road, but it's when you get to the traffic signals that you start to have a problem. If you have a single lane on the roadway each direction, you might be able to handle that. Now, if you have a single lane going into an intersection from all directions, it's hard to make that work. You do north, south, green, and people go, and they go, and they go, and they go to go ahead and get past that intersection because they backed up. Then they shift over to another direction. Say it was north-south I talked about first, then you'd go to east-west, and it happens again. So to go ahead and get the additional capacity out of an intersection, you start adding lanes. You add the left turn lane, you add the through lane, perhaps another through lane, then a right turn lane. The thing about Pine and Howard is we're constrained on the southbound approach. We have a storm drain lift station there that sits smack dab in the middle of a wider sidewalk than we want. So things we can do, we can take that lift station, drop it below grade, push the curb out, and we can shoot for getting one more lane in there, and we can also go ahead and line up the lanes north side of intersection to south side of intersection. When we do that, we move away from, our operational abilities improve. Right now it's operating in what's called a split phase, meaning north goes, then south goes. If we line things up and we get it just the way we want it, north and south go simultaneously, and we can take some of the green time wasted on the side street and put it on east-west where most of the traffic sits. That's what I see happening with that. And by the way, we also have a project. Ellen, is that a CDBG with the CMAC? Sorry, we have a CMAC project to go ahead and put a little bit of smart technology on the signal where it watches the traffic and adjusts the timing going around. It's a discrete improvement at an intersection to go ahead and improve capacity. The smart device knows that you have this many or have queues of traffic coming from this direction, and it knows to shift around there. That would be a test for us, but it's cheaper than moving into a full-blown coordination system. Okay, so that's Pine Street.
You answered one of my questions because I thought it was very inexpensive. I think it said streetlight improvements, and I thought the improvements meaning additional lights possibly, but the cost seemed to be pretty inexpensive.
It was relatively inexpensive, yeah.
For the smart technology and what it can do for traffic flow. So interesting, interesting. Anyway.
But if it works, it's definitely cool technology.
I bet.
Okay, so that's Pine Street. I would say that the intersection is probably a better location to start. Almond Avenue, that has become a subject of late because of a subdivision that's going in at Almond and Stadium. Now the subdivision itself, it's 87 dwelling units. It's not necessarily going to throw a lot of more traffic at the street, but it will. Out of that, we're implementing the circulation element of the general plan that says Almond Avenue is a collector street that goes through there. So the subdivision is building half of the street. Now the question is, do we move forward with building the rest of the street? If we move forward with the rest of the street, things will happen. The question is, what are those things? So to get to that answer, we again looked at the regional traffic, regional model for traffic. And what I've concluded is that model does need some tweaking at this moment because it's inconclusive as terms of what it's doing towards to Stadium Road if you put the if you open up that link. What it does show fairly certainly is that if you put it in, you'll have more traffic on the east side of Stadium. Why is that? Because it looks as though the model's thinking that we're going to take traffic from Olive Avenue and Howard and move it over to Almond. So it will represent, per the model, a relief valve in the system. Now, is that relief valve needed right now? I can't tell you that. I see that in the model. We might want to go ahead and do a more detailed traffic study or look to enhance the model to a greater level to understand that. But I wouldn't necessarily say build the road right now. I would want to understand a little bit better, because the things that will happen is, regardless of what the model says, the model talks about links, meaning the road segments between the intersections. What will happen is when you put that traffic on the roadway or on Almond, the new section, now you're going to get traffic all the way around the intersection at Almond and Stadium. Given we know that there's congestion on Stadium even as it sits, adding another approach to it automatically will take you to a traffic signal at that location. And still, if Stadium's congested, we may have an issue. So we'll want to understand that a little bit better in the near term. Things we can look forward to is Madera Unified is building a new high school. They will shift a certain number of students to the North High School, and that will improve. But I don't think that Almond Avenue is a panacea in any way. I don't see the subdivision as it's going to break the bank either.
Now that proposal, isn't that not all the way through to Pine Street?
It would go all the way to Pine Street. Yeah, and what would happen there is when you look at Pine Street right now at Almond, you see that Almond goes off alignment to cross the tracks at a 90-degree angle.
Right.
So this Almond Avenue would come off of that intersection with Pine, head east, and then pull back in up against the property line between Old Castle and the Madera Unified property to the north. And then there's the question of an MID canal through there. Right. That has a cost. We would, generally speaking, put that underground. And
that was included in the
that cost is there right now.
Estimate, yeah.
But that's a rough cost estimate right now.
Sure. Councilman Garcia has a question.
If you could walk me through this, you said that the developer is responsible for half of the street?
Yes. Yeah. Well, he's responsible to build half a street, but our development impact fees assist in some portion of that. Our development impact fees pay for the center 3 travel lanes. Because it's a collector, it'll pay for a 12-foot travel lane in the middle, and then travel lanes on either side of that. It's the curb gutter sidewalk, street lights, and about 8 foot of pavement that the developer is responsible for. That's his own dime.
So the other half of the piece is not going to be built. So it's going to be a certain section. Would that be problematic for traffic going to and from?
Probably not initially. We would be doing 1 lane in each direction, and with any luck, we can go ahead and get a center turn lane in there. What we've got through there is the developer has half the street, so we'll have 40-foot cross section, and then we do have an easement on the other side of the property line, and that's 30 feet from what I understand. So we can build the center of the roadway and the south side of the roadway.
We do have that exhibit. We do have the exhibit.
Okay, I'll move to the exhibit here. I've been reminded that I'm not working through my exhibits. Okay, so there's Olive Avenue. I apologize for the delay. This is Lake Street, the limits of that. That's Pine Street, and there's Almond. So you'll note that the Old Castle, north and south, over towards Pine, the proposed subdivision, and then we would attempt to go ahead and build Half Street through there. The adjacent property owner has expressed concerns with anything in that area. I'm not sure how that will move forward, but the city does hold a 30-foot easement.
So in the future, if someone bought property and they wanted to develop north of Almond, then they would be responsible for that other
Yes, they would.
portion. Okay.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
Or if they built, somebody else built, they would just pay us back if we were to put in that street, correct?
If it depends upon how we fund it, we can go ahead and make a request for reimbursement of those improvements. That hasn't traditionally been done when we build roads, but then neither do we typically build a lot of roads where development's going to occur on it. One of the prime examples would be the roadway infrastructure out by the airport. There's grant funding used to pay for that, and we have not requested reimbursements for those because there's grant funding. There are many models, and we can explore whatever you might want to go ahead and look at. We can, of course, enter into reimbursement agreements where we indicate that they need to reimburse the city for their costs.
Okay. The one question I did have is it is crazy in that area with the 2 high schools and the 2 elementary in between. And when Matilda Torres is built, it's not going to alleviate that. Many students are going to be transferring over. Madera High is more overloaded than South. They don't have the land to keep those students on it. So opening up this all the way, I would think it would be important for the council to kind of maybe direct staff that this would be something important in the city, because it is crazy in that area all hours. It's not just the beginning of school and the ending of school. So are you saying that our staff hasn't really looked at it yet? Study it?
Since you bring it up, what I would suggest, no, we haven't done a detailed model of Almond Avenue, but you're moving into a little bit different twist on it, which I've pondered before. We can go ahead and do a detailed model of Stadium itself, going from Pecan Avenue all the way to Olive. It is Olive at that point. Going all the way down to that point and studying it, figuring out whether we can go ahead and put in additional travel lanes. Can we work with the school district to go ahead and move more traffic on site? A lot of what happens on that street is parents using the city street to do drop-offs. A lot of what happens on that street is congestion because the on-site facilities at the school just can't accommodate it, so it backs into the street. There are methods, but I don't guarantee that they're there. One of the things about Stadium Road was it was built to an old standard. There was a time when for Collector Street, it was 28. It was 52 feet from face of curb to face of curb. 14 foot was dedicated to the park strip, the sidewalk, and the landscaping. So out of an 80-foot right-of-way, you lost 28 feet to landscaping and sidewalk. That has to be overcome in some way. One of the ways that we attempted to overcome it was when you look at the apartment complex down by Pecan Avenue and the subdivision that's going in, we look to go ahead and achieve, take some of the necessary road width and put it into what's called a public utilities and pedestrian easement and move bicycles potentially into the sidewalk on wider sidewalks. So where you normally see a 5-foot sidewalk, you'll see an 8-foot sidewalk through there. That was one of the first attempts to overcome one of the deficiencies of that street. To fully overcome it would mean that we'd start tearing out curb, gutter, and sidewalk everywhere, which is not something that I'm proposing. In fact, the new subdivision that you see on the screen, they're going to match into the curb and gutter up and down the street. I think they ultimately put that on their plans the way we asked, as there didn't seem to be any ability to go ahead and make use of it. But they are putting the sidewalk in the ultimate location should the city ever decide to go ahead and push the curb back.
So Keith, if I understood you correctly, at this time you would recommend that we do an additional analysis to see if there's an alternative to punching out Almond Avenue, to see if it's cost effective and to see if it actually works.
Yeah, something like that. I would look to go ahead and understand in a more detailed manner what would occur if we punch Almond Avenue through. I'm also I'm also working off of what you were, I think, working to, which would be to do a greater study of Stadium and look for anything we can do to reduce the congestion through there. Now, if that's something that council would like to see, then we can go ahead and put that in. We would use, in this particular case, as an example of one of our funding sources, local transportation funds. It's our most friendly source of funds. It comes with fairly few restrictions in terms of how it's used.
I would agree. Absolutely.
Are we getting those notes? Are we getting those notes? Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, so what I'm going to go back.
Cold in here.
I feel it in my fingers.
Yeah.
You said it's cold?
You on my sweater?
Ron?
Let's take out my sweater. He says it's cold.
Turn the air conditioning down.
Do you think it's cold?
We need to put 200 people in here.
It's cold
like
in
last
here.
night, and then it'll warm up real quick.
Somebody better speak.
Huh? You're cold.
I am too. I was going to leave. It's too cold up in here.
I got my jacket.
Okay.
Somebody give him a
Yeah,
shawl.
you're a woman.
Want to borrow my jacket?
Give him a sweater.
Borrow my jacket?
I'll just turn the air conditioning down.
Big boy, wrap you up for you.
I can't think when I'm cold.
Going back to this list of projects, right now the CIP generally assumes Olive Avenue, Lake, Pine, and Almond. If I were to go ahead and make a recommendation to council, I would suggest that the intersection of Pine and Howard move forward of Lake Street, and then study Almond Avenue to understand.
I would agree.
Good.
Councilman
Okay,
Garcia.
could you go back to the graph of Almond?
Sure.
So do they have any plans of where the access point to the subdivision would be?
Let's see. Right in about that point, they have an access. If you can see my cursor. And then there's one right about there. If that becomes a problem, I foresee the potential for medians going in on Stadium at some point in time, and possibly part of the study. One of the things that you'll see as you look at the various different activities along Stadium is it's a two-lane roadway. Anybody who wants to make a left generally blocks the street. So I see Stadium as that we would potentially put it on a road diet. Put a two-way left turn lane in the middle to get the left turn vehicles out of the way. Have a single lane each direction, and then make it safe for bikes, and put bike lanes on the outside. I don't. To go ahead and do anything else, you run out of room. To go ahead and get two lanes in each direction, you run out of room for bikes. To go ahead and get a left turn lane in there, you start to run out of room for two lanes each direction without starting to squeeze lanes. And squeezing lanes sometimes has a benefit, but I haven't. Squeezing lanes is more about reducing speed, which I'm not necessarily aware of speeding issues out there. So that would basically be where it would go, is go ahead and put the road on a diet. And that's believe it or not, that's a technical term for traffic engineers.
Making that up.
I was not. You thought?
I just, agree with Cece. We used to take our kids to Alpha, and we also used to take them down to South Campus, and I remember it's crazy. I'm just trying to figure out in my mind what the possibilities are to limit on Stadium Road, because as soon as you start getting the traffic and then you try to have somebody cross over to the other side, to the west side, you know, and
Yeah, and one of the ways to do that is to just take away flexibility. Flexibility tends to lead to congestion and slowdowns.
plus you have some children walking.
Yeah, and you're going to see later on in the presentation a project that is attempting to go ahead and make it a little bit safer. We have a number of improvements along Stadium that have gone in over the years to go ahead and try and make it safer. Some of them are sidewalk improvements. One of them is in crosswalk, lighted crosswalks. After those went in, they seemed like they were going to be good. They've been done all over California, but they have a maintenance issue and maintenance issues, and we've since moved on to doing rapid flashing rectangular beacons because they get a higher compliance rate.
And the hawk.
And the hawk, yeah.
Right, don't forget the hawk. That's cool.
Hold on, did somebody look up hawk? Because I'm probably going to have to go ahead and give a definition of hawk. I was going to do that before I got here. Hawk it's an acronym for. Any other questions on roads?
No, I think we're there, Keith. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to road rehabilitation projects. Basically, there are two types, and then you can go ahead and take one type and break that up even further. We have overlays as one type, where you basically grind about an inch or so of the roadway off the top and then put new pavement down. When you do overlays, it usually means that the roadway's condition is such that it's really your only choice. If you don't go ahead and repave it, it's going to continue to break down, and ultimately you're going to be running into a full reconstruction. Then there are seals, and there are a multitude of types on that. I'll go ahead and throw out a few terms. There's reclamite, there's chip seals, there's going blank again.
Got a great
Slurries,
team.
chips, micros. I knew I was going to forget it, so it's,
Team effort.
yeah. And by the way, most of the engineering department here is here tonight, so any question I can answer, such as the type of roadway surface, they're here for
I
me.
got your back.
Yes.
So,
Of course.
push the button. So, yeah, I'd like. I don't want to take too much time asking all these questions.
No worries.
I got 1,000 questions. So, on my street, which is A Street, recently, a couple months ago, they'd put down a surface.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what kind of surface was that on A Street?
Let's see, do we remember which one that is? I'm looking at the pavement management guy, pavement management system guy.
I think it was the overlay
Cross Street.
on A Street.
It was the last couple months, right?
Yes.
It was a chip seal. They didn't grind the street, right?
No, I believe not. Basically, they put a texture up on top. So that would be a seal?
Yeah, it would be a chip seal. Huh? Yeah, they put in a fine aggregate on there. It's a wearing course, so that you have the wearing course it'll hold up under the weight of the tires, and then you got the emulsion that holds it together.
So obviously, you look at it cost-effective wise, the material, everything that you're using, and you make a decision. Is that something you're satisfied with, using a seal versus an overlay?
For sure. And Jose Sandoval very much wants to talk about all that, but we can. That's almost a meeting unto itself. But yes, we do select the types of treatments with our goal being that over time we spend less money. And by over time, 10, 20 years. So over time, if we can do it right, we can take the condition of our roadways and get them up to a point where we call them all good. The pavement condition index, PCI actually, pavement condition index, we want to be at least a 70 on average, right? We want to be at least a 70 on average, and our roadways are high 50s. We're nowhere near where we want to be. So over time, we want to go ahead and be judicious about our selection of roadway improvements. And that is us trying to pick out roadways with seals, do roadways with seals to prevent them from going to a situation where we have to do overlays. Selecting roadways that have seals just before they go to, overlays just before we go to a condition where we have to go ahead and do complete reconstruction. So what we want to do is hold off going to the next level in all cases. And in some cases that might seem counterintuitive. So new roads, if we're doing it right, we can go ahead and seal them every 5 years and get 30 years of use out of them, even though their lifespan is used to be considered 20 years worth of life. If you do it judiciously, you can go ahead and make things last, and you can slowly over time bring the PCI up from the 50s up to 70, and your overall cost then after that will be reduced. And we have a piece of software in the engineering department that we're using to go ahead and make those recommendations. One of the things that you will see in the CIP is our next step in that, which is to go ahead and get a second data point so that the model can see what kind of condition the roadway was in 3 years ago or 5 years ago and what it is now. When it has that information, it can take it and then predict how fast the roadway is deteriorating. If it knows that this roadway is deteriorating slower than this one, it will make you'll know that you want to go for the one that's deteriorating quicker and head it off before it moves into a more expensive treatment option.
Interesting. Councilman Hawley has a question.
Yes. Keith, what requires a road to be repaired? Besides filling potholes, and you look at this road that's all beat up, but only potholes are still being, every month they have to go out and put a new, some old asphalt in there.
Well, potholes are one thing, and that's there's a special term that we have for that in our model, but if we repair potholes as they occur, we can potentially hold off deterioration of the roadway to a greater level. But if you see potholes, you're probably also seeing other issues with the roadway. You're seeing alligator cracking or block cracking. Alligator cracking, the cracking's going like this. Block cracking, it almost literally is blocks, and you'll see large spaces between the pavement. So depending upon how far it's gone, that starts to tell you where you want to be. When the cracks start to get larger, and I'm not speaking technically, but as those cracks start to get larger, it's hard to just throw a seal down on top of it and have it take care of it. But when they're fine, you can put seal down and you fill in those spaces, and the roadway, you can lock it in place. One of the things that 4th Street, I'll come back to 4th Street. I'm not sure how many of you know Les Jorgensen. He's been here for about 15 years or so. But about 15 years ago, they were trying to get like 5 more years worth of use out of 4th Street. So he recommended, it was probably a chip seal or whatever. And Les just seems to know what to do with roadways. So he recommended something, and it lasted for like 10 years until we actually came around to the project and we were ready to go with it. So if you're judicious with your treatment option, you can make a road last even though it doesn't necessarily look like it will last. Another option is go out and look at Granada, south of Pecan. We were getting requests to overlay that roadway. We did a double chip on that, and Les went out there recently. It's been 5 years or so. Still looking good, from what I understand.
I would imagine the weather and all this rain has a lot to do with it as well.
It does. With all the rain, you're driving around, you've seen bits and pieces of things popping up all over the place, including the freeway.
Right.
Who analyzes these roads? I mean, do we have somebody in the department that goes out up and down the street and see a road needs water to be fixed, or how do we go? How do we determine that?
Right now, it's kind of a combination thing. Our pavement management system, which is our software, is primarily touching on collectors and arterials right now. When it reverts to local and residential roads, our Public Works Department is looking at those. And Bob Mack in that department, he is very talented at what he does. He'll look at the roadways and determine where they are at and what kind of treatment needs to be done. But when it comes to collector and arterials, we're using the software, and I'll say it's in its infancy because we want that second data point to start doing the predictions of where the road's going. But in advance of getting that other data point, we go out and we actually have, say, Les Jorgensen or Jose Aguilar, Jose Sandoval, and Bob Mack. They'll go out and look at the roadway and confirm that the model is saying what we think it is. So it's kind of a use the model to identify candidates and then go out and confirm it in person. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry. Funding sources. One of the best things that happened to the City of Madera and many agencies across the country is Senate Bill 1. It led to RMRA and LPP. The RMRA is contributing about $1.1 million a year to the city. I think the staff report says 1.6. We went back and looked at that after somebody said, we think it's 1.1. We had gotten some literature from, I forget which agencies, League of Cities, I think. We got from some League of Cities, and it said that we were looking at potential $1.6 million. So that is not correct. It's closer to $1.1 million. But it's $1.1 million we did not get before. It is major for the streets of Madera. In addition to that, they have a local partnership program funding that we use. That's spread equally among City of Chowchilla, City of Madera, and Madera County based upon population. Given the size of Chowchilla, it gets distributed on alternate years, I believe, and city takes, in this case, I think we have $180,000 for SB1, and then Chowchilla gets a larger chunk at another point in time. The thing about LPP is that we would not get that if we did not have Measure T. Because we are a self-help city, LPP is there for us to go ahead and do these type of projects. We must match 50% with Measure T. And then we have Measure T, RTP, that's, I did it again, Alan. No, the 3R. Rehabilitation, restoration, reconstruction. And then we have Measure T, LTP street maintenance, that's chip seals, and Public Works generally uses that for residential streets. Moving on to sidewalks. Sidewalks that are advertised are under construction right now. We have one that's going on around John Adams School. That's under construction. It's filling in missing links, and hopefully with that we'll keep kids out of the street and be a little bit safer. Sunset Avenue, that is advertised right now. That's taking us from Schnorr to Granada and filling in some, putting in some pedestrian refuges at Thomas Jefferson, and we'll go ahead and show you an exhibit of that. That's going, construction that should begin May, June. This area here, under construction. This area here, under construction, or will be soon. This is the area where I indicated that there was missing pieces in there, and that missing was a problem for us a few years when CVS was under construction. We actually had one person in a wheelchair that had to shift from one side of the street to the other, and they didn't have a place to go. We remembered that, and we're fixing that. Upcoming, Washington School sidewalks. That we see that coming summer 2019. I mentioned that was last thing on that was right of way. If the AHSC grant is successful, additional improvements will be dropping in around that school. That'll include pedestrian flashers, enhanced crosswalks, and a couple other things. Fresno River Trail, the UPR undercrossing. This has been in the works for 10 years plus. We think we are finally there. It's been a long haul trying to get on the same page with the Union Pacific Railroad, but we think we're there, and you see that in the CIP going to advertising spring. Gateway Central 3rd, additional sidewalks using CMAQ and LTF. We look to advertise that summer of 2019. That's subject to release of CMAQ funds. There's not a guarantee that we'll have that released this year with regard to funding. Now, those projects dropping down on the street are shown here. The green is the undercrossing, and the red are sidewalks dropping in place.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
So Keith, I have a question. I don't remember, and I didn't have a chance to pull it up. We put in for the veteran Michael Segola project, which is going to
Yes.
help some of the infrastructure, and some of the sidewalks were included into that. Was Washington one of them?
That Washington, there's an enhanced improvements is what I'm calling them around
Okay.
Washington.
They're enhanced.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't coincide with what we're already doing.
No, they
here.
would not.
Okay, that was my question.
They'd be coming in at least a year later, but there are time restrictions on the AHSC funds. So those will be, given there's 5 miles of sidewalks, those may very well be going out to consultants. Now, one of the things you'll see about sidewalks is we do a lot of those in-house because it's quite frankly more cost effective to do that rather than hiring a consultant to go out there and do all that. It's just more cost effective. When you get into more complex projects, consultants make sense.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes.
I just have a question. On 145, do we stay away from that as far as maintaining the roads, doing anything, and the sidewalks as well? Or on 145, so it would be Madera Avenue?
At the moment, yes. There's been on and off debates about who's responsible for some of those.
So everybody's saying, no, you're responsible? When
I think we got them
Pointing at each
to.
other?
I think we got them to believe that they're responsible.
Okay.
Preliminary award, CDBG. We have 2 on CDBG right now. The missing links around James Madison and MLK. That would be coming in summer 2020 if awarded, and set as a priority over other projects. So, yeah, I just want to go ahead and be clear about that because, yeah, we can move anything forward. We can make anything a priority, but something usually moves into the background as a result of it. One of the things that we would like to see with CDBG is that CDBG moves more towards 2-year time frames to go ahead and work towards those projects. As I mentioned last night, while we may be given a notice an indication that we're good to go July 1st, we don't see officially for 4 months or so that the funding is actually there. So we immediately lose 4 months out of the 12. And that has played in once or twice.
On that one, Keith,
Uh-huh.
the application last night for the 2 projects combined was 520,000, but yet here it says the need is 450. And I think that's also taking away that 10% match. Are we going to fall short on this particular one?
We did have a match in there for the project.
Right.
I think we're pulling it up right now.
Okay.
We got a $60,000 LTF match.
60,000?
And we were awarded just under 400.
Yes. We were doing a 10% match on that, so our match on the smaller project would be 10% of that
Right, I see.
40.
So CDBG what's proposed anyway is 390, and then
Yeah.
and then you have the LTF 60, which is 450, but the ask was 520.
Yeah, the ask was 520. One of the things that you'll see, when we knew that we had a preliminary award with CDBG, we immediately put it into the CIP. The reason we did that was not necessarily for planning and funding. We wanted to make certain that we were in there for the conformity analysis by Planning Commission.
Okay.
So as we move towards budget, you'll start to see these numbers gel a bit more, or a lot more. If the award is less, then the CIP will show those numbers.
Okay. There was a few others like that, so that answers my question for those as well. Councilwoman Gallegos.
Keith, I just have to, since we're on sidewalks, I don't know if this is the time to say it, but The contractors out there around John Adams putting in the sidewalks are rocking and rolling, and it's amazing. I'm there morning, afternoon, and night, and they're not messing around. I do want to commend, I don't know if it was our staff that really pushed them or highly suggested to do a local firm. I did see a local concrete company out there, which was pretty amazing. I have not seen that in the city in a while. We've contracted out to other businesses that are not local, so kudos to your team that.
Sure.
that
I don't know.
picked.
I don't know if there's an active suggestion, but yes, it's very good that the local is there.
So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Okay, these.
I want to say,
Sure.
you know, they said they have money for this project, $396,000 for Raymond Road shoulder north of Cleveland, but they haven't done anything yet.
That I believe. I don't have that on the spreadsheet. Can you Raymond Road north of Cleveland? I believe that Randy Bell is working on that one, right?
That's CMAQ funding, and we have a lot of environmental and right-of-way constraints because it's along the river. So it's this river side of Raymond Road, we're gonna do shoulder paving, but there's a lot of teeny tiny parcels from when the county was originally split. And so we know we're gonna have to go in and do a sliver acquisition from all of those.
Yeah, when we proposed that, we thought it was a whole lot simpler, but the right-of-way is doing something like this, and I'm exaggerating, but it made it a more complicated project.
Yeah, because that's really a dangerous street because they have homeless right along the,
Mm-hmm.
the river edge,
Yes.
and they be walking at night with no lights up there.
Yeah.
Dark clothing.
We used the CD, in many cases we use CDBG funding. We'll call out for a project like that to go ahead and reduce dust emissions because that makes a project rank higher. So we'll call it out because of dust emissions. But our ultimate goal for some areas is to go ahead and get a better path for walking and biking. But that project has turned out to be more difficult, and I'm not sure. I think Randy is working on sending that out to somebody too.
It's going to be going out in a package to a consultant for design along with two other.
Yeah.
Next time is the mic at the podium so that people under people wear it. Awesome.
Yeah, and then we need it on record as well.
Keith, can you take a few minutes to introduce your team? Because I'm not sure if our new council members know who they are.
Okay. Starting with right, Victor Aldama, Assistant Engineer. Ellen Bitter, Project Development Coordinator. Jose Aguilar, Deputy City Engineer. Jose Sandoval, Assistant Engineer. Frank Holguin, Project Manager. And then, of course, you know John.
What's his name?
And Randy Bell is also one of our team. He didn't make it tonight. He went to the doctor earlier today and found that he has something's wrong with his knee. I forget exactly what it was.
And maybe not part of the engineering team, but definitely part of the team, Chief Dino Lawson.
Yes, he contributes all the time.
Dr. Lawson.
Also, I want to say, like, that whole area, I've been nagging about that with the county,
Mm-hmm.
right there in 16th Avenue and your Kennedy coming in there. And should they put a roundabout right there?
Let's talk about roundabouts. We've been studying roundabout at Central, 4th, and Lake, and we thought it was going to be a simpler process. And I took a course or so of roundabouts about 10 years ago. Turns out things have changed, and the thing about roundabout, you set them down, you still have sight distance issues. So when you set the roundabout, You think it fits like that, but sight distance issues cause that. So I'm not totally sure about any particular location at this moment. Roundabouts, Caltrans absolutely. You are? Okay.
I'm going to move this.
Okay.
That way they can use the mics.
Okay. Caltrans absolutely loves roundabouts, and you're seeing more of them.
Yeah, because I've been on two last weekend. I was in Lancaster. They had a roundabout in Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in Long Beach. They had a roundabout right on PCH.
Uh-huh.
In fact, the one person that designed that roundabout, he was involved in the accident and he died on it. You know?
Yeah. The roundabouts are significantly safer. The thing about roundabouts versus traffic signals and other intersections is intersections have multiple points of conflict where people can get into accidents. Roundabouts reduce the number of conflicts down significantly.
Because yeah, people
And they
going
reduce the speed of traffic going through.
speeding right there, 50 miles per hour, 60,
Mm.
and then going around a turn, and you have people line up to turn left on 16 to get to Kennedy or go straight.
Yeah.
28 and a half. I mean, it's hard.
They're-
You have big old potholes.
Yeah, I'd like to see a roundabout at could be our first at Lake Fourth and Central, but you're going to hear a little bit from me that it may have gone beyond our means.
What's the other streets? Ellis, I think they have that's the worst street in Madera.
Ellis is actually out of the city.
By Kennedy. Oh, it is. Huh?
Yeah. We have Kennedy within the city to the west of the 99. We built the bridge, and the bridge is ours, but that sort of spans county and city. But then once you go to the east, it becomes pretty much county.
Then after they built the bridge, they never put any plants, in the
No, that's
spaces. I was tempted to go in there and put some cactus in there.
yeah. The plants didn't get in place, for sure. But anyway, roundabouts. Yeah, I'd like to see us moving towards that. But I'll go ahead and mention one other. There's a city in California that I read about a year ago or so. They say they're tearing out every intersection in town and putting roundabouts in. I don't know how they're doing it, but there are some people that are very convinced about their abilities.
We didn't put in traffic lights.
Perhaps you have to educate the
Doesn't
community
sound
to
like-
how.
Not
to drive a
necessarily.
roundabout.
I'm not opposed to roundabouts, but I am opposed to the one on Caitlin.
Mm. Yeah, we're going to work on that.
Yeah, I'll say no more.
If I don't get to it and I accidentally skip over, or God forbid I didn't put it in here, bring me
It's
back
okay.
to it, because I'm prepared to talk about it.
You've already heard from me on that one anyway,
Yes.
so.
So anyway, roundabouts, yeah, we want to go ahead and explore that, but the costs aren't necessarily cheaper, at least starting from an intersection that's already in place. Okay, there was the sidewalks for the last list of the CDBG coming forward, potentially. AHSC, Affordable Housing and Sustainabilities Grant. That's for the low-income housing and veterans housing at 5th and C. If successful, that will not only provide the city with those structures and an improvement to downtown, but it will also result in as much as 5 miles of sidewalks and 3 miles of bike lanes. If it is awarded, which I believe we'll know in June, they have very specific delivery dates, and it's a fast pace. I'm trying to think if it's summer 2020 for delivery, but we have to go through environmental on that, and I think we avoided any right-of-way issues with regard to it. That is the AHSC grant sidewalks. Sidewalk repairs. I thought I'd throw this in because I think we're talking about this a little bit more these days. We don't have any projects proposed, and that's per past practice. what our current policy is we, the repair responsibility rests with the property owners. We do provide some assistance, and that's through the 50/50 program assistance, which when a property owner considers that, it doesn't necessarily work out to being much assistance, because as soon as the city puts money in the game, prevailing wage requirements also come into play, as well as insurance requirements and everything else. We're kind of stuck on many of those things. Now, can the city do more? It's kind of a cost versus liability situation. Can we get past it? What we know is if we start throwing money at repairs, we may create an expectation on the part of the community that the city takes care of the repairs. I suspect that, well, I'd more than suspect, I know there's more repairs out there than the city can afford in a reasonable time frame. So if we start there, we'll find ourselves picking and choosing where we repair and why this person doesn't get it now or in the near future. And if they don't get it now or in the near future, what becomes of that spot? The city's now on notice, and the liability starts to hang in the air. The property owner has liability because he's responsible for the sidewalk per California Vehicle Code. The city has responsibility, potentially, and this is based upon my last seminar that I went to with regard to sidewalk repairs and the like. It's a potentially because we don't actually have the sidewalk, but we're aware of it. So that's, I haven't heard an answer to that. But that's a debate, and we can, of course, look further into that if council so desires. Completely open to that.
I'd like to have that conversation. Councilman Garcia has a question.
Yeah, I'd like to have that conversation at some point.
Okay.
If we see a tree that's obviously got a trunk that's going to damage and destroy a sidewalk, if we're proactive, we can actually take care of that tree so it doesn't.
We might be able to, and that's also part of the discussion. Well, the city attempts to protect the trees. The city's also not responsible for the trees. So we can attempt to go ahead and let a property owner know that they need to address that. But where are we in terms of that? We need to understand what we want to do with it. We tell them they need to go ahead and address the tree, and early on it might be fairly simple. You get an arborist out there, they look at it, they say, not a big deal, cut the trunk. They might also say that tree is dangerous if you attempt to save the sidewalk by cutting a root. The tree may have the potential for falling over. So if we want to discuss it more, I would say that I would like to go ahead and get some more research in place to go ahead and better answer your questions. What I know is the city doesn't necessarily have the funding to go ahead and do those things. So if we don't move into it ourselves proactively, where do we want to be? We could go ahead and come back to that. If you have any other questions, I'll try to go ahead and answer them to the best of my abilities, at least.
Yeah,
How do we think about, and I know we all see this every day, but all these trees that are tearing up on Gateway Drive right in front of the park? What are we going to do about that? Because that's ugly.
The simple answer to that is the trees probably do need to come out, or we accept the trees for a while and put in a new curb somewhere in there to allow the trees to do what they're doing. But ultimately, one of our projects on the Measure T tier, the tier 1 of the Measure T, is to go ahead and widen Gateway through there. And there's not enough room in Gateway to do everything we need to do in terms of 2 lanes each direction, bike lane, and so on, and sidewalk and the like. So I fear that the trees are, their future is limited regardless of depending upon how far in the future we go, the trees don't have a future, a long-term future. So They could come out now. We could do additional studies on that to see when they're coming out, but I think they're coming out. It is very definitely a cost. I'm not sure, John, I think Bob Mack may have done some research on that. Is there anything you can volunteer?
Thank you.
I knew I'd get him up.
Woke me up. Staff discussed this issue probably, 6 months ago? I think it was myself and Keith and Mr. Merchant. And we agreed in that meeting to explore the problem to see what our opportunities were. Obviously, the first one is take the trees out. We wanted to see if maybe there wasn't a way to try to preserve them. We came up with something, frankly, we don't know if it's in fact viable, but excuse me. When you look at the area in which the trees are planted, there's room to the west of them. The curbs are very close to the crowns of the trees. So there's room to move a couple of feet to the west, and there's actually a parking field to the east side, which would be kind of the west side of Gateway. The last discussion that I had with Dave Merchant was to potentially explore taking the existing curbing out. And if you look at where the road is raised from the trunks, it's very close to the trees. In other words, the roots dive down very quickly. So we believe that if we were to take the existing profile of the curbs and just move them maybe 2.5 feet to the west and to the east on either side, that we could potentially restore that curbing. That's about as far as we got. It's an idea that I think has some merit and probably deserves some further exploration if council thought that was worthwhile. As Keith had said, keeping in mind all along that the end game here is they're most likely going to have to come out. Now, the one thing to consider is that in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, what have you, if we had to put a little bit of money into the project right now and save the trees, and we didn't end up removing them for 20 years, excuse me, it was probably a worthwhile venture. So that's basically where we are at this point.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Councilwoman Gallegos.
So Keith, when we spoke about this, I think a year and a half ago, I was under the impression that we had to leave them alone because we were going to widen Gateway. Is that correct? And if we were going to widen it, tell me if I'm wrong.
No, I'm just listening because
we were looking at a 4-lane
yes.
pathway.
Given everything that would go into an arterial roadway through there, we'd probably be more pure lucky to find out that the trees land in a place that could allow them to stay. We could take steps to go ahead and ensure that they stay there. What we know about that area is we don't need a full 16-foot median like we do in other places. So as we go through there, we might try to squeeze the median and find a way to go ahead and let those trees reside in a safe place. That is us moving into preliminary design of the project.
So what year are we looking at to widen Gateway?
That's based upon the funding availability, and right now Measure T shows 2 of the remaining city projects that were in that measure as being the last ones to occur. And there's a debate as to whether there's going to be additional funding, any funding left when we get to the sunset of the program. We've done a couple things on that program already, but other agency projects moved forward out of fairness to allow them to have projects. So sunset of the program is 2027. Earliest for the project will be 2025, subject to funding.
So we're looking at a long time, so it would be advantageous for us to think about moving the curbs out for these trees.
It
to make
might.
them look nice in the city, because that is a pathway a lot of our residents do take
Sure.
of Madera.
Yeah, in terms of aesthetics, it may make sense to try to figure out how to do that. It's 6 years away at the earliest, and if Measure T doesn't have any dollars left, then we need another measure to pay for that. And curious to see what will happen. Turns out the original measure didn't have funding in there for the widening of the Gateway Bridge. And maybe we can make that work, but it just wasn't there.
Maybe they can, like elevate it above the ground a couple feet and leave the roots alone.
Potentially, that all things are possible. They come with a cost. Elevating by a couple feet or a foot or whatever means you're bringing in that much base material to construct over. And then you need to transition into adjacent properties to make that work. So,
Let's talk about funding. How come we can't just take it out of the general fund and pay for it?
Sure.
I mean, when there's money sitting there, we all gonna die before we spend it. So I think, each year we piling more and more in there, but nothing's been done to use it. We ain't gonna have no earthquake. But we need to get some of these things done. If we got money that we just sitting on, I always know it was sitting there for a reason, but the reason is get the city back in shape, and we just got money just accumulating. I think it should be done, because that's an eyesore. I've had people call me and say, ooh, that looks ugly. Will you rent the park out? And everybody talk about it when they do family reunions. And to me, it's an eyesore. I don't know if anybody else think that way, but I think it's the worst thing going through around our city, that this here just uprooted and nobody's taking attention to it.
Sure.
Well, Councilman Hawley, we've had a planning commissioner probably for over 5 years has been really upset with that actual.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to kind of agree with Councilman Hawley. As a policy, you stated that we don't use general fund traditionally, and I just wanted
it's not necessarily a policy. It's traditional.
It's just traditional.
We've never sought it.
And if we can ask the question, well, what are the benefits of either continuing that tradition or maybe changing it?
It's completely up to the council's prerogative. During the mid-year budget, which we'll be discussing next Wednesday at a special meeting, the one benefit right now is that we are in sound financial shape. We have more general fund dollars than we had projected. That's not to say we have a lot, but again, we have more than what was projected. So what that means is that we do have funds that are currently unassigned. If the council elects to use some of those funds for a street project, that's the council's prerogative. Going back to what Keith said, maybe the city historically has not used it, but again, that's not to say you cannot direct staff to allocate some funds, some general fund dollars towards that. Historically, general fund dollars, I'm going to speculate here, they probably simply weren't used because they were going for other items, but again, it's completely up to the city council. If the city council would instruct us to, I'm going to throw a number out, to use $1.5 million for X, and then we'll make sure that occurs. So again, historically hasn't occurred. That's not to say the council can't direct staff to do it. And if that's the council's vote, or if that's your direction, again, we'll do it.
I appreciate that. And
Keith, could you get us the council estimate of what the projection would be to?
Yeah, what we can do is we'll get with John and figure out what the most logical is in terms of getting something that's aesthetically pleasing, I suppose.
I was thinking also, we have that, the railroad bridge, and we can have a elevated, like sidewalk, just like you go to Santa Cruz, you see above the sand,
Mm-hmm.
made out of wood.
Yeah.
I guess they have steel or cement footings.
Mm.
Make it more attractive, make it more original, make it similar to the railroad track.
Sure.
Bridge.
What we'll start with is try to go ahead and do the most economically feasible. And if that's a saw cut all the way along there and putting in a curb of sorts, then try to go ahead and.
It's like when I saw, we ran into you at Old Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had the wooden sidewalks.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you know, something to make it stand out whereby, you know,
Just
it'd
put
be
some
like,
cement in there and fix it.
yeah, well, you know.
That's all I want. I want to see it fixed.
I like to see it.
I don't
more
care about
tourism,
what
you
San
know.
Jose's doing, what the coast is doing. I just like to see it fixed. It's been sitting there since who knows when, and it ain't getting no better. And we keep talking about it over years after years and hearing people talk about it and nothing getting done about it. I think it needs to be taken care of.
Well, you know, also, you know,
I don't care about San Jose and North Carolina. I'm talking about Madera.
or, you know, also, you know, when you're driving down there, you know, right along the street, the sidewalk is sticking up. Like, if somebody hit that, they're going to flip.
If they hit it the wrong way, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll look at that, and what I think we'll want to do is, just in case, include it in the CIP for the purposes of conformity. I think that it probably doesn't require conformity, but it's probably safer. And we'll figure out how to do that. I think we've noticed that with the Planning Commission, but we'll see what we can do.
Keith, I want to briefly go back to the SHARE program. In the budget, it's budgeted $20,000 annually from the LTF. Is that just kind of an arbitrary number to have it in there, which it looks like it's also for the ADA curb returns?
Yeah, many of them are placeholders. There hasn't always been a use of the SHARE program. So for those, if it's not used, it goes back into the reserves of the LTF and goes to something else later. But if we were successful in having property owners use it, then we'd have a placeholder for $20,000 a year, and you'll see that with the railroad and a number of other things. And when you put those various placeholders in there along with defined projects, you'll note at the final end year balance projected that that's staying flat at the moment.
Okay, that's what I thought, and that's really a tough pill to swallow. I think everyone up here has taken a call from a resident that one assumes that the sidewalk and the tree is the responsibility of the city, and we have to respectfully tell them that that's not true, but we offer the 50-50 program, and you're saying that that does trigger prevailing wage on any kind of repair?
It does.
Which the cost obviously is?
About 30% higher is the numbers that I know, but.
So, and this may be a question for an attorney, but can we identify low-income areas or very low-income areas that we may be able to do more, as you had said before, without getting into necessarily triggering any kind of special favors? But when you look at South Lake, South A, B, and C, in those areas where these trees are 100 years old and there's some serious damage, and obviously in those particular areas, they don't have the funds, whether it's prevailing wage or not, to fix these sidewalks that are ripping up their driveways and front lawns and things like that. I just to your point, maybe we can discuss it later. Hopefully there is something more that we can do in this 50-50 program, whether we identify some serious need when it comes to safety or low-income areas or something to that effect, that we can help out our residents in the community.
So one suggestion that the council can take a look at, if the council hypothetically were to set a certain dollar amount, and I'm going to throw the figure out $100,000, and per council direction, if the council were to instruct staff to say between A Street and D Street, between 5th and 6th Avenues, these $100,000 are going to go specifically for this area, for this item. We can definitely do that.
Okay.
So, and if the council were to instruct staff that this is to go for sidewalk repair in this area, and then we can do that. I think one of the things that Keith had alluded to It's just simply managing the community's expectations. But that's not to say that we cannot select a specific area, a certain dollar amount, and then once those dollars are expended, the council, again, it's completely up to the council. You can allocate additional funds, or you can simply say once those funds are expended, we're no longer going to allocate it, and we'll look at it in X number of years, or you simply say the program's over, and that would be appropriate.
Okay. If we can maybe follow up with that, and just, I'll trust that staff can identify some serious area of need.
Yeah, well, probably, I believe CDBG provides, we have various different sources to go ahead and identify low-income areas or very low-income areas. And
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much for that.
That makes sense. Okay, based upon last night, we threw this into the PowerPoint to go ahead and give you a little bit more detail of what's going on. ADA improvements at Pan Am and Bergon and Centennial Park. Those drawings are apparently 100% and pretty much ready to advertise in July. I think that the engineers' estimates on those are showing that the actual costs are significantly lower than what was anticipated, so we may be looking at reprogramming some of those CDBG funds to other projects. That can be a selection process. Council can tell us how we would like to go ahead and do that. We generally, I think, foresee that would go back to the committee, right? That's one potential way. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first two projects. Yosemite and Elm, that is constructed and functional. New sidewalks for safe path of travel at Washington. You saw that's for July, August. I'm not sure whether we have typos in here, but it's supposed to go this summer. Parks and ADA improvements, and one of these was City Hall and improvements at City Hall, and there are a number of other things in there. I guess that would be advertising in spring 2020. Stadium Road and Gary Street pedestrian, the Hawk.
The Hawk.
Have I showed you the picture of the Hawk yet? I don't think I have. I know you're all excited about it. Where'd it go?
Overhangs the street like that.
I'm just gonna move ahead. There's a hawk.
Hawk.
What it does is when you push a button, it goes from yellow to all red, and it functions generally like a traffic signal in that respect. Get better compliance with this than pretty much any other thing. The last thing I did with searches on this was Arizona seems to be throwing these in every place. My first encounter with it was in Sacramento. I thought it was a pretty good device, and I researched it, and this would be our first opportunity to see how that works. Ultimately, the best way to protect pedestrians is to stop the cars in their tracks. Millview Community Center roof, that's okay. I apologize, this is coming straight from other sources. You just wanted to let me know that my graphic was too small. This is going ready for construction.
Do we still use that center?
Yes, absolutely. Isn't that in cooperation with CAPMC as well?
I think that this is the one where CAPMC threw some additional dollars in.
Did, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, this will be $130,000 going fairly quickly
Yeah,
as
I
a
think
claim.
they paid $40,000, if I'm not mistaken, to complete the whole roof project, so we'd have to do it in
Yeah.
pieces.
Streetlights. That was discussed last night. We don't have any capital projects planned. That's outside the CIP, but NG Services has identified multiple projects as part of the Integrated Energy Assessment Identification of Energy Conservation Measures project. And I'm going to go ahead and flip to the slide which is fairly small. This came straight out of stuff from them, so I wasn't able to improve it much more. But what you see on it is those red lines represent proposed streetlights throughout town. And that's a significant number, and I believe that the locations and the block numbers are visible there. So this is preliminary. It's not fixed. I believe that there is the ability to provide input on it.
I know I'm on Railway Avenue, my street, they have a street light that's out.
Okay. You got that? John's got
So
it.
Keith, what if there's some other areas that as council members, we feel that are in need of streetlights because it's really pitch black, dark?
That just becomes a choice of priorities and projects. Solar streetlights, well, they get the job done. They're not perfect. They do get the job done, but they come with an additional maintenance over time. They're a little bit more expensive to install, as I understand it. Plus, you have the maintenance of the batteries. They eventually wear out.
So how did we-
Then the solar panel itself as well.
So how did we come up with this list for streetlights?
Let's see. I think I'm going to go ahead and ask John. I have a
this was-
general idea. I was working on it in my mind, but
When NG made their proposal, they actually came through Madera and they worked with John and a few others and just kind of recognized some areas of need. But actually, this would be dictated by council. So if there's areas that we feel need some attention, that would certainly come from our direction. This is just what they had noticed with the energy savings that the city council would be able to light pretty much all these areas in these
this
particular
is
neighborhoods.
it's part of the package to come up
Right.
with a package that pays for itself over a defined time period.
Right.
So Angie came up with this list? Yes.
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 And so the one thing that's worth noting is that Angie's going to come back. We're going to have a workshop. For some reason, the May 22nd city council meeting sticks out in my head. But I know it's coming up within the next month and a half. And at that time, Angie's going to present their findings to the city council. And at that point, council can direct Angie and staff to either modify it, to make amendments, to make any types of adjustments that the council feels is warranted.
Yeah, this was not a set in stone list. I think it was just something that they had recognized as part of their package that they felt the need were in these particular areas. That's all. I think the savings annually was $230,000 ish. If I remember, I'm kind of spitballing here. I'm sorry. So with that savings, they had thought you can continually put these lights in.
How do we fund these lights?
That's out of the NG savings across the
Okay.
the entire project.
As part of Angie's presentation, they're going to be identifying funding or potential funding sources as well. Some of those would be loans, some of them would be grants, and just different funding programs. And they'll be making that recommendation to City Council.
Great, thank you.
Councilman Garcia.
They provided us with a model of how they come up with this to say that these would be the best and to get most cost savings and be economically feasible. What do they use? What formula do they use?
They do have a feasibility study. Unfortunately, I'm not an expert in their analysis, but when they come to make the workshop, those are the types of that's the type of information that they'll be providing. I know that they've been working with staff. They were here as recently as 2 days ago. They were here 2 days ago where we met with them, a team of city folks, and we were discussing the potential options and just different types of programs. The focus 2 days ago, unfortunately, was not on streetlights. We were simply looking at city facilities for solar panels. However, as part of their work program, they did look at this, and they'll be making the recommendations to council. But again, at that workshop, city council can instruct them, and we can get some better or more in-depth information in terms of how they selected these areas and what assumptions were made for the salary savings, or the cost savings, I should say, not salary savings.
Yeah, I would be particularly interested in the difference between solar and electrical, and then how do we reduce our carbon footprint? Is technology not advanced enough so that the maintenance would decrease You know, some of these things are.
Yeah, it's not quite there yet. The solar panels tend to degrade at a certain percentage per year. So after a certain amount of time, there may not be enough power to go ahead and light the light, or they just fail. The batteries, all batteries go out at some point in time. The thing is, these are fairly expensive components. And then when you think about the solar panel on top of the pole, it's a larger target if somebody chooses to shoot it out. I haven't heard that they get shot out, but it's just, you know, anything that fails that wouldn't normally fail, you're going to have to replace it on a 10 or 20 year life basis. The luminaires themselves, lights used to have to be replaced like every 7 years and was high pressure sodium. Then they switched over to LEDs, and you could go ahead and get 20 years out of them. So technology has helped us out tremendously with regard to the lights, but the solar panels and the batteries, you know, that technology marches on, but it still costs us more over time to have in place. We can only hope that they come up with something that's sustainable and just never really goes out. But I haven't read anything.
Yeah, well, you did mention the fact that they're looking at ultimately saving us money.
Yes.
And I could imagine that at some point they would be doing that by putting in solar as opposed to the other.
They have a number of locations, and I'm not as close to it. I've seen the various projects, and they're not in my head. But the solar panels at various facilities. There's batteries at a couple locations. I'm primarily thinking solar over at the park near the youth center. There's solar panels there as well. They're looking at more efficient facilities. They're looking at replacing the air conditioning system on this, because this one uses an extraordinary amount of money because it really never stops running. But when you put it all together, those savings help to pay for these street lights. The street lights don't save you any money because they weren't there beforehand, so you need the savings from other parts of what NG is proposing to pay for these. So they're reasonably confident that they can put in all these street lights and have them paid for through the rest of the project.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
Keith, with that, we do have some solar lights in the city right now, so
Yes, we do.
who maintains those?
Public Works does.
Public Works. So if something happens to them, we as a city are, like the battery was to die, we're the ones that are responsible for it
Yes.
now.
John, have we had any concerns?
We were maintaining lights today.
Okay. All right.
For the record, we were maintaining lights today.
That's right. Thank you, Keith.
People say I can't be funny.
Their first one? First one for everything?
So anyway, we're on to traffic signals. Okay, Howard Road and Granada and timing of signals. Howard Road and Granada we're expecting to receive the 100% drawings fairly soon. And I just want to go ahead and discuss a little bit in terms of how some signals move forward. As Howard Road and Westbury was taking precedence some time ago. That goes back 5 years or so ago when we had community complaints with regard to two intersections. One of those intersections was Howard Road and Westbury. The other was Tozier and Sunrise. We took an item to council, indicated that we had public concerns with regard to certain intersections, and went through how we prioritize signals. Indicated, I think, that we had other signals on the list. We could go ahead and consider those, but council selected Howard Road and Westbury. Howard and Granada was on the list. It eventually found its way into it. We also had to go ahead and pay for Yosemite and Elm, but in the particular case of Howard Westbury, that was a decision that occurred several years ago as a result of community input or complaints.
Yes. And once you put that stop sign in, it alleviated a lot of that.
I'm sure it did. Stop signs represent a legitimate intermediate measure before a traffic signal goes in. Nothing wrong with them. You put them in, they can stay there for years, and you can see them in certain areas, Madera, Fresno, any other city. You'll see stop sign, four-way, all-way stops. So it could probably be there for a while. The trouble with this location is it's not something where we necessarily or easily can go ahead and move funds. That was a CMAQ funded project, and we are looking to go ahead and get past a right-of-way issue with that, and we should be able to go ahead and move forward with that, again subject to release of CMAQ funds. That's a timing issue with regard to getting past our right-of-way issue.
My question with Howard Road at both Granada and Westbury is future development. Putting the signalization in prior to that, and we have future development in that area, I'm assuming we plan for that as far as dedicated turn lanes, curb and gutter. There's a residence right there at Granada and Howard that does not have curb and gutter. So we take into account that future development, I'm assuming?
We do the best. One of the things about signals, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about Howard and Granada in particular, because it utilizes city development impact fee program funds. Impact fee funds are primarily for new installations. They're not intended to go back and install after the fact. So what we do at locations like Howard and Granada, we do our darndest to go ahead and get the signal poles in their ultimate location so that when the roadway does widen, that they'll be in the correct location. You're going to see that we're doing widening at Howard and Granada, but it's relatively limited. We're trying to go ahead and get additional space in there for turning movements and the like. Development will fix some of the other deficiencies. But the signal, it's our full intent to make certain it goes in and doesn't have to be moved. Because if it has to be moved, there's no funding for that, short of using some of our other revenue sources. We can't really go back to the development impact fees.
I'm very optimistic in that particular area, that area northwest, I guess, at Howard and Granada, that empty lot. And then I know in the Westbury area where Monty's is, there's a few people, and there's some multifamily that's being built over in that area. So I'm optimistic about the growth in that area, and that's why I ask about not necessarily cart before the horse, but putting signalization without having development.
Yes. One of the other things we did, which you won't recognize for a while, and is we tried to go ahead and put the poles on that empty lot, put them in a particular spot so that we have the ability to go ahead and put in bus turnouts. So it's not something you've necessarily seen, but in Madera. But as development moves forward, we want to go ahead and get some things ready for development. You see bus turnouts there, you're going to see them on Olive Avenue as well. But you won't readily see it at that location. But you'll know that the poles are in the right spot.
I don't know what they're called at Yosemite, and it's not, I want to say K Street. It's not where West America Bank is. I Street.
Okay.
Yeah.
They had to put in a big heavy-duty pole because the semi-trucks were turning sharply and kept hitting the signal light.
Public Works just does that for fun. The trucks get hung up on them.
Yeah.
No,
at Granada and Howard expect the same thing, is all I'm saying, because that's a big route for semi-trucks on.
They did that to protect the signal pole, because the signal pole's worth like 25 grand.
Yeah.
And a truck can take it out fairly easily. Well, it takes some work to do it, but they can very least go ahead and rip and tear at the signal heads and everything else that are hanging off the pole.
Right.
There was one example, and I probably have a picture on my phone, but there was one example at 4th and I, where a truck was trying to make a turn on that at the church. Yeah. They got hung up on it. They had the trailer was just strapped up against the pole, and they couldn't move. So they brought in a forklift, picked up the trailer, backed it out of the way.
Yeah.
So the pole is our investment. The truck driver knows that they're not supposed to do that.
Right.
I believe that's, anyway, they know.
We're lucky he got hung up. Most of them don't, and they don't leave a note either.
Sure. Yes.
Thank you, Keith.
Pleasure.
I have a question on the timing signal, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Timing signals. And is that something that is, again, complaint-based, or is it something, I see we have ENG 000C
I'm sorry?
as one of the items. But it says that just the studies, the traffic signal studies, and that's on.
Inside the local transportation fund, the LTF.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we will get complaints on a fairly regular basis, and it's our goal to go ahead and respond to those, and to some degree it's dependent upon on our ability to go ahead and put staff on it at any given point. But what we'll do is, if we got a concern with regard to a traffic signal or something, we'll go ahead and we'll have the intersection counted to determine whether it meets warrants. And then if it meets warrants, we'll do our best to prioritize it based upon how much traffic is on the road, the speed of the road, any number of factors, how many warrants it's actually meeting for a traffic signal warrant. Because getting to the threshold of passing a warrant doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do a traffic signal. It means you've met a warrant. You may have another signal down the street that meets a warrant or has a higher need. When a traffic signal goes in within, call it 500,000 feet of another area, the circulation in the area will adjust. Everybody will know where the traffic signal is, and then you take care of that one, and the other one will drop down the priority list. But you want to be careful in just dropping signals down. You want to understand where the ultimate best location is. Because you will see every so often locations where they've planned for that traffic signal, but then you'll go a few hundred feet away and they've planned for that traffic signal. You don't want to do two traffic signals within a few hundred feet of each other. So ideally we'll know that a signal's warranted. Ideally we'll know that it really is in need at that particular point. When it's on an arterial roadway with a fair amount of traffic, I typically don't want to go ahead and put in all-way stops if you have heavy traffic. Olive Avenue is an example where there's not a lot of traffic, so it'll work, but we wouldn't want to be able to double. We wouldn't want to double the traffic on that roadway and have it doing that for the long term. So we have a signal going in there. That signal was at Olive and Knox was only warranted back in September. So yes, we do study. We study every location we get a concern with. We drop down. We hire a firm. They drop down cameras. They video the intersection, and then they do the counts on that location. They just watch the video and figure out how many cars are going through it. And we'll also count pedestrians. We'll also count bicycles, and we'll do it over 12 hours.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the first two. Olive and Knox. That is the third one on the list. As I just noted, it was warranted in September. The drawings there are at 90%. You'll note that it says it's within the Olive Avenue improvement project. If everything we do, we have the ability to go ahead and separate from projects. We can build this signal early, if so desired by council. What it means is we go ahead and we'll figure on the road not being there, and we'll just compensate. Moving on to next.
Keith, what's the projection for that signal on Olive and Knox?
Well, it would be going in with the project as it is right now, so it wouldn't be going in until next summer.
All right, thank you.
If it stays with the project, then again we can break it out if there's a desire. But the four-way stop that's sitting there, it's doing its job.
It sure is.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
It sure is. I agree with that, brother.
Yeah, it's doing its job, and the accident where there's somebody blew through the intersection, that was a drunk driver. You can't really anticipate drunk drivers in anything
right.
you do. They'll blow through a traffic signal. They'll blow through a four-way stop. So I consider that outside the area where I would go. Now, I think that the traffic accidents have probably dropped down at that location meaningfully, and the stop signs are just fine.
I got a question. And this was brought up in one of our meetings the other night when Ron was making a statement. Did the city help rebuild that wall for them people?
Doesn't look
Anybody
like
know
it.
about? Okay, because he made that statement the other night when he coming in running his. I mean, when he came in there talking, saying that he thanked the city for helping getting that wall put back together or something.
It's probably was repaired as a result of auto insurance or home insurance. We don't.
I didn't think we did, but I heard him say that, and that's what made me ask this question. Because I didn't think we were responsible for somebody running a stop sign and taking out somebody's fence.
Yeah.
Okay. You was concerned about the cat. That's what it was, too.
Yeah, he was. Olive and Roosevelt, that's going in with the project on Olive Avenue. Tozier and Sunrise, that is a privately constructed signal that is under construction. Look forward to seeing that completed. Sharon Avenue and Avenue 17, that's going in with the development project at that intersection. That's being paid for using developer impact fees. And they're also constructing a private signal just west of that at the entry to the auto center, or travel center, excuse me. Stadium Road and Gary Lane Hawk shows up on this list. Again, 2020. Almond Avenue, Schnorr, Flashing Beacon, or Rumble Strips. That intersection is one of those that is not easily explainable. That intersection does meet standards. We have had it analyzed, and yet people are blowing the intersection going southbound and going through a gate. So we've added a project to the CIP to look at either flashing beacon or rumble strips. Now I have debated the flashing beacon because the people who have been running the stop sign the last ones have run through the stop sign with a flashing red stop sign. It didn't help. And that was in addition to the advance warning sign and everything else, and signs plastered all over the fence. So putting a flashing light over the intersection, I'm debating whether it's something we want to do. So the rumble strips, it's taken me a while to go ahead and get to a point where I feel comfortable with that. We researched with City of Fresno to see what their experience is with those, and they seem to be good with them. They only say don't put them in residential areas. Kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, it makes sense. And if I can just add to that, Keith.
Sure.
That is the T intersection where EVAPCO is.
Yes.
And so a lot of the accidents are DUI related, and they blow through the stop sign, and then what stops them is the gate at EVAPCO. And so EVAPCO has reached out to us multiple times because their insurance is kind of going through the roof. And so they're looking for a partner in the city of Madera to say, what can you do? And sooner rather than later. They just recently celebrated their 40th anniversary in the city of Madera, and they're, again, they keep asking, what can we do to address this particular issue? So being a partner with a 40-year business, and they bring up the fact that that's where a lot of kids walk home from school, or the South cross-country team runs through the particular area and that kind of stuff. I really want to make this a priority because there's always a danger, and there's always the potential for that particular danger, but we need to do something.
Sure. And given some of the accidents, the rumble strips are, I think they're the worst of two possible, issues. Because one of the last people that blew the stop sign and went through the gate and ended up against the equipment on EVAPCO broke their back. And they were well inside the EVAPCO site after doing it. So if we can get the rumble strips down in place and make certain that regular road traffic doesn't veer off into oncoming traffic,
Right.
that's my goal.
Sure.
And that's the one thing I want to overcome.
Sure.
But if I can wake up the driver, that's better than them going purdy red.
Right.
But we also, by the way, we have Public Works has been working with PG&E, and they're close to having another street light installed on that intersection to light it up a little bit more.
Well, I know you know about this area, and I know you've made it a priority. I just kind of wanted to fill in my colleagues and again reiterate the fact that this should be a priority.
Sure.
So Keith, this is not my forte, so can you explain what the rumble strips are?
They vary between the historical version of them is where they etch the street with lines. You know them when you're driving down the freeway and you veer right.
Okay.
That's a rumble strip. When you're going straight down the roadway, you can do the same thing when a car crosses over them. The tires hit it and they rumble. The options to doing that is using the little white buttons and put those on the road in like 6, 8, 10 lines. So when a car hits it, they also rumble again.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to ask a question. I noticed you had, is that on Tozier and Sunrise? Is that Tozier or is that 28?
It's both, really. When the roads are annexed into the city, they generally revert from the county designation of roads and avenues to
Because I
city.
always knew 28, and I see Tozier, and I said,
It's all
kind of threw me for a loop there. Okay.
It's sometimes confusing with when I'm dealing with the county, and they'll go ahead and say a number, and I'm saying a name, but we get past it pretty quickly. Recently completed signals Yosemite now, talked about that already. The Lily Street and Sunrise Rapid Flashing Beacon, I believe that's doing its job. There's the Hawk, and this is a map showing the various different projects proposed and constructed that have been or will drop down in the city. So you'll note they're dropping down everywhere.
Hulk signal.
Moving on. Okay, this is intermission or questions. I was thinking about putting something funny on here, but I even asked staff. We had one, but we talked about copyright. We're not sure whether we're on YouTube or not.
I'll open it up if there's any questions, or if you guys just want to stretch,
Continue.
a sip of water at least, Keith.
Question is just about that section?
I'm sorry?
Just about that section that
We've
you
talked
went
about
through?
so far. Or
Just that section. Now we have more coming, and
Okay.
Ellen Bitter will be proceeding.
Awesome. That was 2 of 10, Tim. You want to? Yeah. Why don't we? Yeah. We're just gonna, Ellen. We're just gonna take maybe 2 or 3 minutes to stretch our legs.
I guess it.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for that much-deserved break. So far, so good. I love the banter, the questions, the input. In all
The
honesty,
jokes?
we're good, and the jokes. You're absolutely right. I love it. So why don't we move past intermission and/or questions and move on to the next round, Keith?
Okay, we only have one more slide in this towards the end that is transit related, so I'm just going to jump to the very end. So don't look at anything in between.
Okay, promise.
'Cause I might get lucky with a joke. Okay, the one slide that's related to transit is we want to go ahead and show you a picture here. This is actually a couple days old. It's a little bit further along than that. And this is the transit facility. It is moving along. It is in our CIP. It's worth 5.4 something million dollars. My numbers in here are kind of approximate. I just grabbed, I think, the construction numbers in most cases. But this project's funded by FTA and Prop 1B, PTI-MISEA funding. And it is the most recent on this, as we expect completion by October of 2019.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, and if you don't have any other questions, I'll just go ahead and slide on back, and Alan Bitter will take over.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that, yeah. I've done that twice. I've done that twice now. Okay. While you weren't looking, I modified the PowerPoint. We also did add Caitlin and Isla Vista to the CIP. What we have is an old style traffic circle. You can call it a roundabout at this particular intersection.
Where's this located at?
It is generally south of the river and the extreme west edge of the city, north of Sunrise.
Lincoln School. Behind Lincoln School.
Okay, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Behind Lincoln School.
Now this went in as a traffic circle, and it hasn't gotten any respect in terms of what it's supposed to do. It went in as a traffic calming device, and it's just not, and I think that in some respects it's doing its job, but in other respects there are people who are disobeying it, and they're making a left turn on the wrong side of traffic as they come up to it. Now that, while they might get away with it a few times or a few years, eventually somebody's going to get into an accident at that location. So this particular addition to the CIP is to go ahead and add the physical dividers on the approaches to the intersection. With those dividers in place, that should prevent, hopefully completely stop people from trying to go ahead and take the short way around the roundabout.
They do that in Parkwood. As we have in Parkwood, I've seen somebody go on the left side.
Yeah, it's if a roundabout or any other device is designed correctly, you find a way to go ahead and make certain that people obey it. Now that sometimes is easier said than done. In this particular case, it's a fairly wide open space going around the interior, and people can do what they want. So it's we'll be installing that. I've had a request to a consultant. It's been about a week and a half or maybe two for a quote on doing the design for this. So when I get that, I'll determine where we are in terms of being able to go ahead and award it. It's the same consultant that did the original design. They recommended a lot of sign, or not the original design, but they made recommendations about a year ago in terms of beefing up that location with additional signs and paint and everything else. And then they, as part of that, they said in their report, if this doesn't work, you can consider physical separators. That's what we're looking at, as physical separators. So I hope I'm going to have to go ahead and remind the consultant I want that quote, and this should be moving forward.
I agree. I've been contacted numerous times from the same neighbor on the corner who has cameras and sends me video on a every other month basis. And so the paint and the signs and the knocking on the doors of the residents and the promises just have not worked.
Yeah.
So the pork chops or the physical attributes or whatever they're gonna have to be.
Yes. There's one difficulty on one approach because there's a driveway there, and I'm see what our consultant can do for us.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move into the next phase of this.
Thank you, Keith. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad you're enjoying these exciting projects as much as we do. We are now going underground to sewer and water and storm drain. Nice. And they are primarily funded by enterprise funds or the funds generated by the ratepayers. They're established, they're set by the council. Any modifications to those rates require a vote, a Prop 218 vote, and for the water and sewer system, that was recently done in 2015 based on projected needs, projects, and also maintenance and operations costs. So that generated a new revenue stream, and if you count them up, right now we've got 30 new water and sewer projects in the CIP. So we're being kept very busy. Typically, the enterprise funded projects, they cover two types of projects, either deterioration, deficiencies, things that are broke that we got to fix. They're either identified from public works staff and what they experience in their day-to-day operations, or perhaps we know of other conditions that have been generated from other studies, our sewer video. Periodically, we camera our sewer lines, or if there's a known water leak, then that can turn into a project. Other areas are capacity projects that are not related to new growth. They could be identified in the master plans for fire flow issues. If we've got, we've had some drought issues affect our stability in our water system, so maybe we need to lower a pump in the well or upgrade the pumps and to adjust to those conditions. We've got chlorine generators now in our system, and periodically those have to be replaced. And so those are the projects that you would see in the CIP funded by the enterprise funds. One of the tasks that was identified as a project when the rates were approved was a sewer and water condition assessment study, a detailed study of the city's infrastructure for both systems. It catalogs our entire system, an inventory of the age, the material, the size of the pipelines, and then also detailed investigations, sewer cammering of about half of the city, highest risk first, and then for the water system, they're going to be doing leak detection. We haven't gotten into that yet, but that is coming up this spring. We'll be identifying the highest risk water mains, and they'll be doing leak detection and then tell us where our next project should be. It was ironic that actually this RFP for this was on the street out for consultants before the Schnorr collapse. It was a real easy sell once we got those agreements and contracts in place, because it's perhaps that could have been identified ahead of time and avoided. So I'll first talk about the sewer funds. Right now, our current program, we have a substantial investment going in our wastewater treatment plant. We're up about $4.5 million. We were able to capture and address concerns that have been identified over the last several years. Plus, during construction, we identified the new wet well, or the old wet well that was not capable of being rehabbed, and so we were able to, with our funds that we had in reserve, fund the new wet well for the system out there. Another project that we have that's advertising right now, we had the pre-bid today, is for replacement and an enlargement of the diameter of the sewer pipeline in Sherwood Way from Lake almost to D Street, and then a piece of West Smith Way just east of Lake. It's a piece that I think it went in at a different time as the other adjacent development, and it needs to be increased diameter to handle the flow from all the neighborhoods in the northeast side. We were also able to add to that project a replacement of an alley in the Dalton River side, just east of Lake. This was a project that Public Works has had numerous problems with. They cambered it. There's roots in the clay pipe, and so we were able to add it to this project. So, and then a fourth piece that we are adding that's been generated from this condition assessment is a lot of manholes have been paved over for various reasons, and we can't access our system, or we can't get the cameras down in there. So we are going to add 21 manholes to be adjusted to grade. So now we can access that. So we're slowly able to take care of these deficiencies in our sewer system with the enterprise funds. Coming up in the CIP, we have a lot of projects that are...
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen that someone covers up a manhole?
It could be an oversight during a paving project if it wasn't properly marked, and once that first layer of asphalt gets down...
it's buried.
It's buried, and they didn't catch it when we did our inspection. That's very rare. There's only 3 or 4 of those in the project. Most of these manholes are in Avenue 13 going out to the wastewater treatment plant. They had problems, I understand, with the trucks and all driving over the manholes, and because the road isn't great, that the lids were popping off. So they just went out there and put some cold mix or temporary asphalt on, but there's 16 manholes going out there that they ended up covering, but that's part of our sewer condition assessment, so they need to access those manholes, so we're going to get those fixed properly, and we probably do some bolt down lids to keep that from happening again. So yeah, that's there's a project coming up from Caltrans. They're going to be paving over Yosemite and 145 in a couple years. They don't adjust manholes to grade as part of their project, so they are going to be looking for the city to participate in that. So look for that in upcoming CIP for all those manholes. We're doing several studies this spring regarding some lift stations. Fairgrounds lift station has been a problem for Public Works. It's in need of a bigger fix, and so we are going to be putting out a request for proposals for a consultant to analyze the lift station and tell us, makes recommendations on pumps that need to be upgraded, and there's some capacity issues to make sure that the pump station can handle the current flows and the projected growth flows, but also it's an old lift station. It was put in 1970s, and so a lot of the equipment in it just needs to be replaced, and it's time. And so we have a consultant project working on that. Also, there's a small lift station out at the airport. They're going to look at that. Those projects will result in recommended projects that will happen next year. So you'll see those either probably the cost coming forward in 1920 for those projects when they go to construction. And then as we continue with our sewer condition assessment, more projects will come out, and you'll start to see more detailed project listings. So, but for the sewer funds, our emphasis this year has really been on the wastewater treatment plant.
Ellen, just real brief, just for my own knowledge. Earlier, you talked about the scoping and cameras. How far have we gotten, ish?
I'd say we have cameraed 50% of the city, probably 80% of the first phase, the highest risk lines. Yeah. So we're now moving into the larger diameter mains and going out to the treatment plant. That's our next step. We want to get in there. First we have to flush and clean the line, and then the cameras go through. And depending upon how heavy the flow is, sometimes we have to do the camera work at night when our flows are lower. So.
And just, is it kind of meeting expectations? Are they better than what we thought, or maybe worse?
I believe we have identified all of the immediate fixes, and none of them are dire.
Okay,
But
good.
they might find a hole in a pipe, but it's not a heavy flow or it's a low volume street. Those are on a project that is going to go out for a consultant to design this spring. I got a new list from our consultant of other locations. It fits on one page, so that's a good thing. And I believe that is recommendations that they saw after reviewing the video of what's taken place so far. So the next step will be then analyzing our entire system based on age and material, and probably just get into a regular program of replacing those really old lines before they do become a problem.
Sure, of course. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
I got a question. I noticed last week we had a sewer problem with a truck. Yes?
Doing maintenance.
Yeah,
We have our equipment. Something broke inside of it.
Maybe Arnoldo can shed
Yeah,
some light on that.
Council, maybe John can address this. So last week we did have an incident on Olive Avenue.
Actually, it was on Gateway. It's right down the street. In the normal course of business, staff were flushing a large sewer main that runs down Gateway Drive. They got probably almost 200 feet of our large hose into the pipe, and all of a sudden they were trying to retract it and it got stuck. So we spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out, number one, exactly where it is. So we measured the hose, we had an estimation, we flushed the line and then cambered it, and we were able to tell exactly what was going on. The sewer line had actually come apart and shifted like so. So I can't remember what day was that. The time flies so quickly now. Yeah, it was either Wednesday or Thursday. No, it was gone Thursday. I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday. At any rate, they were able to move in. They had pinpointed almost exactly where the break was, dug it up, got our equipment out, made the repair. So we're better for it now. The system's working as it should.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Nobody got hurt, though. That's the main thing. Okay, good.
So Ellen, our cameras hadn't picked that up yet, hadn't gone to that area?
Well, they had gone through there, and when I heard about the incident, I made a note. We don't have the video footage yet, but we can make requests, and so I did want to request it to see if it was evident from the video. If it was below the water level, and the camera, the pipelines aren't totally empty when we camera it. So if it was not visible because of that, then they wouldn't have caught it. So I'm curious myself, and I want to look into that.
What are we doing about manganese? About treatment for contamination in water?
I'm going to let John take that one. Maybe addressing our testing requirements.
Because I know they have funds, and grants to clean up water, from the states.
Right. Might be a subject for a different meeting. It's extraordinarily involved. We have a very comprehensive testing system, our testing program. We test in accordance with state regulations. Basically the biggest offender at this point that we're looking for is DBCP. And what the state requires is that we test every 3 years for DBCP until said time that a well hits half of the maximum contaminant level, and then that triggers additional regulations that makes us test every year. We have periodically from time to time had wells that had hit half of the maximum contaminant level, which means that we're still well below what the state would consider a significant exposure. And we have one well where years ago, when it was originally constructed, it exceeded the MCL, and it's well 27, which is right over, kind of in the area we were just talking about on Industrial Avenue and Pine. And as a result of that well exceeding the MCL, it was shut down. The city actually sued, put forth a lawsuit, received approximately $964,000. And with that money, we put a treatment system in that is still there. And some years back, this is where it gets kind of involved. So we put a treatment system in that was very effective in mitigating the DBCP. There was another problem that developed over time, and that is that the system is a filtration system, and as the water flowed through it, the DBCP would attach to this carbon media that's in the system. Over time, components would build up on that media, and the nitrates began to form on the media, which is a completely different issue, and it was beginning to slough off into the drinking water supply. So while the DBCP was being well controlled, there was a separate issue that arose over time. So at
John, I hate to cut you off, but I want to stay at task at hand, and I want to stay. It's a good question, and that maybe you can, on a side note, answer that question or let us all know. But
it's like I said, it's really complex.
It's very complex,
Yes.
and it is interesting. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I want to make sure we give Ellen time for her presentation. We stay at task at hand, and we stay on the CIP.
And we can talk later.
If I may, Mayor?
Constituents, they've been asking me about that.
Yeah, no, and it is a good question. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to be rude, but I want to make sure that what's agendized and what's task at hand, that we stay on task for this very lengthy CIP presentation. And I'm sure John can answer your question for your constituency and make sure that you have all the proper information.
And if I may, Mayor, we've been working on a write-up, and when I say we, I mean John. And so I'll be getting that out to the City Council here very shortly. That describes exactly what John was going through in detail.
Perfect. We'll have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Please continue.
I think to address the council member's concern regarding the CIP, there is currently no known issues that are triggering the need for any projects at this time using our enterprise funds. So that helps that. So a good segue into the water portion of the enterprise funds. This year, we completed 7 projects. We put them all together under one contract for either filling in gaps in our system or upgrading water mains for fire flow issues. That project has already been completed and closed out. It was about $700,000. Related to the Well 27 project that we were just talking about, to deal with the flushing, we needed to create a system where we could flush the nitrates out, and so we ended up putting a special pipeline under the railroad spur to provide an outfall so that when the well is flushed, it has a place for the water to go, and that was a project that was completed using our rate funds. Coming up in the CIP, a substantial amount of our program is dedicated to our tanks, both current, I say old, current, and future tanks. The first one is regarding the water tower by the Burgon Center, and we're currently under contract for a study to evaluate what our options are. We have programmed in this next CIP about $480,000. That would represent about the minimum expected costs if we were to just take down the tank. It's presumed that any other options would be more costly, and of course, at council's discretion to review and change the project if that was the way that went.
The way it's presented here for the water storage tank, it says a 6.75 million gallon tank.
you were saying.
But I know we've had kind of a few other discussions about different capacities.
I think the project for the, I don't remember the number. This is for the study of the old tank.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that,
I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
well, that one is coming soon.
Yeah.
So that's just to let you know, it's a project that's been added to the CIP and proposed for funding at the lowest expected level at this point. The second tank, or the second projects are around the Cook tank. It's the 1 million gallon tank. We have not been able to find the original as-built drawings, and we feel it's time for a analysis of the structural analysis to make sure it's going to continue to meet our needs. And at the same time, it's due for both interior and exterior coating, and those are quite intricate processes. So we will be putting together a proposal for an engineer to complete all those evaluations. And then those costs will be determined and included in future year, probably the following year CIP. So moving into our future tank that's proposed and that we're currently working on, the northeast tank that was originally in the master plan as a 6.75 million gallon tank. That is, we have the technical memo, just because of how many items that have been coming before council, and we wanted to get through our CIP, that we have scheduled that for the May 1st council meeting. So you will be seeing the complete draft technical memo with details, budget figures, but we do have a sneak preview tonight for you because they've been working on their presentation.
Nice.
So I stole a couple of their slides to give you some advance info. This particular slide, it's the citywide water system. It's showing a potential location for the water tank. It's along the Ellis Avenue alignment. The original proposal was further north and east at Avenue 17 and Lake Street, or Road 27 because it's out in the county. Substantial cost in providing transmission main to there, and the growth is not developing fast enough to put that in. So our consultants recommended bringing it closer to town and working with the infrastructure that we either have or is coming in the near future. So this particular location, just for illustrative purposes, is at Ellis, and I think that's D Street. The original budget for the project did not anticipate as much transmission main as is now projected to be needed for the filling and the emptying of the tank, drawing the water from the west side off peak, and then discharging it into the system. So the red segments show some lines that they evaluated that could be installed to meet the need. I have another slide that shows probably the alignment that will be recommended. And of course, the final length of the transmission main will depend on the final location of the tank. I did include in the proposed CIP funding for the additional transmission main. So it's not next year, but it's the following year when costs might be incurred associated with that. This slide shows the blue line is the recommended transmission main that would be installed, tying in with the new well at well 38 that's going in for Love's. This transmission main, it's 24-inch. It's going to provide benefit to the system as soon as it's in place, assuming the Love's well is online. So that will be of great benefit to the northeast side of town. The other colored squares or rectangles are preliminary sites that we're looking at. The good news is we're not finding any constraints to these sites per se, so there's still a lot of them on the table. It's kind of making the narrowing down of the choices a little difficult, but we will be coming to you in May with a suggested location to start looking at sites. And it's flexible. We have flexibility in maybe if it's not that one blue square, it could be the parcel right next to it, but it gives us a place to get budget figures from.
Alan, how much acres are you looking for a storage tank?
We're looking somewhere between 2.5 acres. Some of the sites, just they're already maybe 4 or 5 acres, so that's what is highlighted. But generally around 2.5 to 3 acres. When we presented to the council in December on the tank, we had a lengthy discussion about a lot of the demand projections that have changed since the original master plan. Water usage is down, growth patterns have changed, and so what that has resulted in is a projected future needed tank of about 5 million gallons. That's at growth build out. So we're down from 6.75 to 5 at a build out size tank. Our current needs don't require a 5 million gallon tank. They have proposed a 2.5 million gallon tank would be very sufficient to meet our needs and on in the next 10 years. We have also evaluated a slightly larger 3.25 million gallon tank, factoring in some drought conditions perhaps, and we'll provide the details of those analysis. And then we also have looked at, well, what happens if we just put the 5 million gallon tank in now, get it constructed and financed all at once. So all of those options will be presented to you at that meeting, and we'll have costs for those as well. We looked at concrete versus steel. Right now, the winner is concrete. Even for the smaller size tank, it's turning out to be more cost effective for this size project. If we did a smaller tank now, whenever demand requires a larger tank, we can we have a shelf design, we could put it down right next to it. The parcel would be big enough for both. The budget figures that they will present haven't gone into great detail on funding options, so just at this point, they're looking at straight traditional debt financing at 5% interest and 3% inflation. That's when they're looking at projected future costs. And then the costs that they presented are for a total financed project, and that's more related to the next slide. I wanted to highlight here that the smaller of the tanks, the 2.5 million gallon with the additional transmission main, is still coming in with our original budgets that we had established early on for the project. So that's good. The second column is showing a future tank, say at 2030, of another 2.5 million. That would cost approximately, and at the costs 10, 15 years from now, it would cost $12 million to build that second tank at that time. The third column is what it would cost financed today to put in a 3.25 million gallon, probably stretch a longer time frame before another tank would be needed, if it's needed. And then the fourth column, is if the city constructed the ultimate 5 million gallon tank today and what that cost would be. So those will be presented to you in May, and the consultant will be here to answer your questions on those. Before I move on to the other projects, any questions to take back to the consultant on this that you want addressed? Or I can keep going. All right. Okay. So aside from tanks, in this year's water program, we have planned to replace the water main across the Fresno River where it has been exposed. Wonderful rain. We haven't been able to get in to survey it, so that's been on hold for a bit, but soon enough they'll get in there, and then we'll have a project coming, probably under construction in 1920. We also have several projects addressing the city's water meters, getting meters on accounts that don't have meters. There aren't that many left. Unfortunately, they're the difficult ones that we've been putting off, but we're going to tackle those. A lot of the automatic read meters are now old enough where we need to start planning for their replacement. So we've got that program in place. And then the old style manual read meters, they're not efficient. They're not capturing the water usage very well. That's another large project that we have planned for this year too.
When you say that, that means it's charging us more than we're paying? that we?
The old style, the manual read meters are, they're not reading the consumption well. And if anything, it's shorting the city on potential revenues because they're not over-reading, they're under-reading or not reading at all. So that's to a benefit for us to capture those. And also it helps the consumer know if they've got leaks or other problems on site perhaps too.
Do we contact the consumers when we see that there's a leak?
I don't know. They would see it in their bill. I don't know how our utility billing looks at the individual bills, but.
Well, let me tell you, they do let you know. I had a leak, and they showed me all the months mine was leaking. And so they do give you a printout of what the leaks are and how long it's been leaking, because I still have that. But they don't just tell you where. You have to have somebody come out and find it. So they do update you on your leaks if you see that your bill is too high.
So speaking of utility billing, we don't automatically send out a notice if it detects a leak, but yes, if somebody questions why is their water bill so high or something to that effect, then they can pull up the reports. It's tracked in the system. We can easily identify when it's going. Let's say that it doesn't stop running at least one unit throughout the entire time. Then they say, yeah, you have a leak. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't quite have something that automatically sends out something saying you have a leak, but we're looking for ways to be able to do that.
So does each resident pay a fee for that service? Is each resident paying $20 to have the software that puts in place to say that when there's leaks in their system?
Not specifically for that, no. So there is a base fee that covers, base services plus the meters. It's the flat rate that you're talking about, flat rate fees, but not specifically for that, but for service. And it really wouldn't cost us more to have that. But I'll certainly gather more information and let you know what we're looking forward to with such service, where we might be able to automatically notify them that they have a leak.
That'd be wonderful.
Well, by the way, I think our initial target was like January of 2020 for the new utility billing system to go live. That's the new Tyler Munis system.
Councilman Garcia.
So I see a bullet point in here, inventory and replacement of automatic read meters. So I'm assuming that we would be looking at upgrading if we need to, because when were the automatics installed?
I think they go back almost, John, correct me if I'm wrong, 20 years for some of the original retrofits that were done. And then we've had, over the last 15 years, projects where we've gone in and converted them. So they are getting to that age. And for however many accounts that we have, we need to get, we haven't yet established a great inventory and database that we can just plug this information in and it'll tell us how many that we have are 20 years old, how many are 25, or so we know which ones to replace. But then once we have those numbers, we'll be able to project annually how much we should spend on replacing and upgrading those meters.
So at some point, we'll know how many of the old manual readers we have and these other automatics, but we don't have that right now?
We know how many we have of the manual read and the automatic, but what we don't have in a database is the age, really, more than anything, and which accounts have what age meter. So the information is out there. We need to compile it in one single location so that we can then easily determine what our investment needs to be annually for that.
So when you mentioned the replacement of the old style manual readers, you said there were the more difficult ones to replace?
They are difficult, especially in a commercial type business. They're large meters, and the new style meters don't fit easily into the water service connection and backflow preventers that are there. So they're quite expensive actually to retrofit. Say a 6-inch water meter to change out from an old style to a new one, it could cost about $25,000 just for one meter because of all of the appurtenances and the fittings that go with it are quite expensive on something of that size.
So whoever you're trying to put a meter for, they pay for that.
They're paying for it through their rates. They aren't going to pay individually for their own meter per se. The city owns the meters, so it's on us to repair or replace. Right? Okay.
Interesting. Fascinating.
We pay for it later.
Always pay for it. Councilwoman Gallegos.
So Ellen, I see project details here on the CIP that we are still installing new water meters. Is that for residential or is that commercial?
There are a select few residential that might have fallen through the cracks. Perhaps at the time there was no account at that address, so we didn't know that there was an unmetered account, so we're capturing those. There are some cross lots where in the years past, maybe one service fed 3 or 4 parcels, so it's not fair to put the meter on and first guy pays. So those projects actually involve splitting those water services before we can meter them. Those are the kind of residential accounts that would be on there. And there's a few multifamily and commercial accounts as well.
Mayor Pro Tem Montes.
And that was going to be my question, because I remember a long time ago I read those meters, and they are hard to read sometimes, and especially in the summer and stuff when you get condensation inside. But that was my question. Are they only on commercial? Because that's what I understood that they were. But you're saying that they're not. When there's new meters, maybe I understood. So we have 3 different there's meters going in where there never was a meter.
That's what I'm asking.
That was, I think, the question I just answered. But then on the old style manual read, we're focusing on the larger users first, and then we will work our way down to the smaller, if there are still residential or a 1 or 2 inch commercial service. But we will eventually get those in the program to get upgraded to the manual read, definitely.
Councilman Hawley.
Yeah. Say, for instance, like when they were replacing these meters and there was a vacant lot, would they still put a meter there?
If we think that the lot is going to develop, then the developer is conditioned to put a meter in. Occasionally, we have replaced or changed out a meter. I'm trying to think or at least provided a box for a future meter.
Okay.
Perhaps if it's not vacant, not developed, we haven't put the meters in. That would come in with development.
So simply a point of clarification, the city, it's generally not advantageous to install a meter because, again, the city owns the meter. If it's a vacant lot and if it's not slated for development, because the warranty on those meters starts once we purchase it. And so if we're not going to have development, we're better off not installing it because then the warranty expires sooner.
Thank you.
Makes sense.
Okay, few other projects. We've got some well site improvements, changing out the motor drives for more efficient pumps, and updating and replacing chlorinators. They just have a fixed lifespan, and they need to get replaced. I think we've got 4 identified for next year in the program. And as we get into our water condition assessment and the special investigations, I'm sure it'll be kicking out a lot more projects that you'll see more detailed by location with costs associated with them in future CIPs. The other enterprise fund, it's a rather stagnant fund as the rates have not been increased, again, because it's subject to a Prop 218 vote, and that's the storm drain program. Over time, the pot has grown enough where a project probably could be done But I think once they're drawn down, that's going to be about it for storm drain funds. So we don't have any projects yet, though there are a few candidates out there, and it's a good pot of money I won't say an emergency, but if there is an urgent need, we have some funds available for that.
Councilman Garcia has a question.
On the corner of, I believe, Lily and Cross Street, during this latest storms, I took a drive to look at my neighborhood to see if I could see anything really a lot of water standing. And I came up across this one, and the water was almost to the door. It was about 1 inch away from the door from going in the door of the home that was there on the corner. And so I sent a picture over to Arnoldo, and at that time you said, yeah, we're looking at it. Or I can't remember if you said pumps. I don't know anything about this technology, about storm drainage and stuff. Do we have pumps located throughout neighborhoods that you pump out the water that are built into our infrastructure?
There are a few small pumps around town. I don't know if there's any in this neighborhood.
I'm not familiar with you said Lily and Cross?
Lily and Cross, yeah. This is small, it's south of 6th Street, I believe. Right in that area.
I think that's a gravity flow there. I don't think there are pumps there.
You know, so just to go back to a text message from that evening, I texted Dave Merchant, and he informed me that there was a submersible pump in the area. However, it is an older pump that sometimes can't keep up. And I think he had reached out to maybe your team, John. Maybe you were unaware of it. I'm personally not very familiar with it. Besides that, Dave had informed me that it was a submersible pump that was relatively old, and so that's something kind of yeah. We'll have John take a look at it.
I appreciate that. That neighborhood is, economically disadvantaged, and we certainly wouldn't want to see, because particularly we had some really bad storms coming through, and I can imagine it trying to keep up with the capacity. But there was a significant amount of water. There was a truck going by, and that thing, was fairly high. So, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. I'm coming to the end of the sewer and water and storm drain. You guys come back up above ground. Any further questions or comments or?
Councilwoman Gallegos has a question.
Ellen, I only have this question because on Christmas Eve, it seemed to be imperative that we have a problem, and I did speak with the sewer manager and found out there is, and I do see it on the CIP. On Christmas Eve, we had our trucks out probably 3 times, and then on Christmas, I saw them twice on Mainbury, because I guess we have a sewer problem. We also had a big water leak last year on Mainbury, and then across the street from the water leak, there was another sewer issue that they cut open the street also. So I do see on the CIP, but I don't see I see a projection when that is going to take place. And I guess we did correct the problem between Sunset and
Lansing, is that it?
Lansing, and then we stopped, even though we needed to go all the way down to Howard.
That's correct. That project is scheduled to be packaged in to a larger consultant contract, so we're trying to package as many of the small ones together into one, so we have one contract to manage, and we have that many more shelf-ready projects. I think the piece from Sunset to Lansing was kind of a trial project. We did a pipe burst method, so we were actually able to burst the pipe with it's a system where they burst the pipe and pull the new pipe in right behind it. The intent is to protect or try to save the trees, because the sewer line goes right under the median, and they're huge old trees, and the roots have caused a lot of damage to the sewer pipeline and the sewer laterals. So that's what's happening is the roots have gotten into the folks' sewer laterals, and they, all of a sudden, just one day, that's it. They break or clog, and so on Christmas Eve probably, and that is it's a problem. And so we're hoping we can do a similar treatment. Our engineer that analyzes the rest of the system will be able to guide us so that we don't have to take out the trees, or as an alternate, run a parallel new line in the street if the trees are to remain. So, and then at the same time we do that, we do replace the laterals. because they are a problem, and they will continue to be a problem until they're completely replaced. So I would, the project is funded and moving forward, and I think that you should see it scheduled for construction in next fiscal year.
Did we send cameras down there also?
You can't get cameras down there.
Get
No,
down.
the roots are so bad. Yeah. So it's been a known issue. So
Thank you.
uh-huh.
Looks like that's it for underground.
Questions? Yeah. You had this one. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ellen.
Sure.
Very informative. Yeah.
Next on the list is the, basically it's Measure K, the fire station with a value of around $8.2 million. And I think I built engineering and a few of the other costs in there. So it's an over $8 million project. Just received feedback on what the schedule is for completion. It looks like it's December 2019. I think they actually gave a specific date of December 18th. It's going to float around, but so before the end of the year, with any luck, the fire station will be done. The rain did cause issues with regard to the station. It was wet and soppy. Even after you heard about being delayed with regard to that, the contractor got out there and it was continued to be wet. They tried to go ahead and put equipment on it and sunk into it. So we also found that our source of dirt, which was the adjacent basin, was contaminated with asphalt, so we had to work through some issues with that. We ultimately got to a point where our geotechnical engineer could go ahead and say, you peel off this layer of dirt and we should have good dirt underneath it. We were out there on Monday trying to we were checking the moisture content on the soil, and we got down to 9%, I think, which is where we wanted to be, and they started excavating. So the station is moving forward. If we had a problem with the dirt in the basin, we were looking at the contractor had already offered a change order of about $100,000. We avoided that.
Great job.
But it's just a matter of continuing after it. If the soils do turn out to be a bit wet for us right now, we may have a small change order coming in to go ahead and take the dirt out of the hole, mix it with some drier dirt, then put it back in. That's preferable to waiting for a little while longer for the soil to get to a point where we need it. So the station is proceeding. Bridges. There's only really one bridge in the current CIP, and that's the Westbury Bridge. Want to go ahead and talk a little bit about that and let council know about future needs that will, for bridges over time that will be needed for continued growth. Examples: Gateway of Fresno River, Village, I want to say G, I get it, the G. That'll be coming through, and there will need to be a bridge at that area at that point. Oh, I apologize. Road 23, I'm a little bit out of order. Road 23 will require that. Gateway of Fresno River, that is the Measure T tier project that we discussed, and then a number of other bridges. So it's not just Westbury that has a need, but the Westbury, I'd say, is the highest priority for us at the moment. What are the primary funding sources for bridges? That's our transportation impact fee. Currently it has a balance of about $2.5 million, generates a little over $200,000 a year. But about a year ago, when the development at Avenue 17 was moving forward, council determined that a certain amount of money from that account would be used to go ahead and help keep that project moving forward. So the current balance is going to be less than that, or the balance is going to be less once certain improvements at 17 and Sharon get completed. Should note that over the near term, there will be an impact fee update coming through. That update, as it's shown, anticipates future bridges and other things. So the fees would increase and would allow for the ability to go ahead and focus in on various different projects. So if the fee is based upon 10 bridges, and we have a priority on one bridge, that bridge may potentially be accelerated over time. That's a give and take, of course, because additional fees will obviously be discussed at the council level relative to their impacts on developers. The impact fee also includes missing road segments and interchanges. That's part of what the special impact fee is, and it's been used in the past for undergrounding of power poles adjacent to road projects. That was a determination by council, oh gosh, probably 8 or 10 years ago, to go ahead and make certain that when we did a road project, we did it right. We didn't just push the poles off to the side and call it good, and then figure out how to go ahead and underground them later. So when we do the road projects, we underground using those fees. We take the credits for what it's worth to go ahead and relocate the poles and use that towards the undergrounding costs. So it's one of the things that we do to go ahead and try to offset those costs a little bit. As I think I already noted that subject to how the fee moves forward, how it's accepted, it may allow acceleration of projects to go forward. Last thing, studies. State Route 145, Yosemite is a downtown Main Street. Kickoff meeting for that is next Thursday, 1 p.m. at the Madera Arts Council. So if anybody's interested in attending that, that'll be the start of it. This project needs to be completed in less than a year, so it'll be moving fast. And with that, oh yeah, one more slide. Our staff is requesting that a minute order be approved accepting the report and authorize submittal of the CIP to the Planning Commission for determination conformity. Bullet number 2 is probably the most important thing that we need here. I've noted a few comments. We've all noted a few comments throughout this meeting regarding possible changes to the CIP. We've talked about Almond Avenue. I haven't necessarily heard direction to move Almond Avenue in those studies in front of Lake Street at this point in time. So if council wants to go ahead and provide input that directs us to adjust projects, we just probably need to go back through our notes and make certain we're on the same page.
Yeah, I think Lake Street should be first.
I'm sorry?
Lake Street should have priority because they started that, I think, before Almond, right?
It actually started before Olive Avenue, in fact, and as I was indicating before, the only reason we're talking about Almond Avenue is Lake Street doesn't. I haven't been able to establish that it has an absolute need in terms of traffic. Lake Street would have had a higher priority had the Department of Finance not lowered the growth projections for the city. Now, I probably need to go ahead and get you a little bit more specifics on this. What I've got is from the MCTC, the regional model, shows 7,000 cars per day per direction on Lake Street. Now that I think is lower than the threshold for what the model would say for 2 lanes each direction. Staff is happy to go ahead and go whichever way council chooses on projects. We are limited in funding. What you see in terms of the projects laying out in there, Olive Avenue picking is the first with the funding. Lake Street is shown second, and then after that we don't currently have the project's funding. You'll note inside the CIP there's a funding source that's called to be determined or whatever that means. We haven't identified money. Essentially it means the project's not funded.
Undetermined.
Undetermined, there you go.
You talking about Lake Street below Cleveland?
Pine.
Lake Street,
Yeah.
Lake Street between between the river and Cleveland.
Yeah.
South of Cleveland, yes.
Yeah, I think they have what?
From Yosemite to Cleveland. Including the roundabout?
Well, no,
It's a different project, but I mean, that's in the same, that's on the same area.
Yeah, the roundabout is south of the project. Really, the project starts to taper off as it gets to the bridge because we're not looking at moving into the bridge.
Okay, so from the fire station to Cleveland.
Kind of that. It's
Ish.
it's even north-ish of that. As we get to the bridge, there is no widening of the bridge, so
It doesn't quite go there. My concern is, I know that's been on the table for a long, long time, but
Yes, it
I
has.
think those growth patterns and those projections have changed. That's a $7 million project. There's a lot of acquisition for a short length. I think the immediate need is more at the Olive area. I think the impact, and they'll both have a great impact to the community, don't get me wrong, but I think we'll have a greater impact. I think we can get done a whole lot quicker in the Olive Avenue project.
well, the Olive Avenue is first right now and is funded.
Lake and Pine.
And
In Pine?
Pine and Howard.
Almond.
Oh,
Almond.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, over time, as
Olive
if
and almond. Always
Eat
do
visuals.
the both.
if growth proceeds west of Pine, that traffic will have two options. It'll be coming down Howard or down Pecan. And right now, we know that Howard is hard pressed in terms of its ability to accommodate traffic. I think some of it can be accommodated through improvements at the intersection of Howard and Pine. And some of it can be accommodated through Almond Avenue, subject to the impacts that Almond Avenue will have on that general vicinity. Hence the study that we would probably want to go ahead and do. Pecan, generally speaking, that will be the back door as Olive and Howard start to get more and more congested. The traffic will decide that Pecan's the way to go, because it probably will be. I occasionally when I go down Howard Road, eastbound coming up on Pine, the backup can easily go past the shopping center.
Again, in my opinion, the current growth on that Stadium Road, Almond area is happening with the 80-plus units that we just approved. Also, the multifamily and the single-family DMP homes that are off of Pecan. That's happening and happening now.
Another
The
20 or
transit
30
station will be
units.
opening in October.
The transit facility, the possibility of other development at Freedom Industrial Park. I would agree that Almond, at least the study anyway, that would have to be our next priority for sure.
Okay. We will move forward with a study. And I see pens going.
Yeah, pins are going. That's my opinion. I mean, I want to
yeah,
make sure that we're
that's-
clear as far as the council's concerned. Not to take anything away from Lake Street. I know that, like I said, it's been on the table for a long time, but I think we should collectively as a council make sure that we're all comfortable with that same direction.
Well, I was thinking that, they're building new residential homes, right off of Lake Street, near the fire station.
There is a handful of the River Walk or
Yeah.
there's maybe 8 or 10 units or so.
And, I use Lake all the time, and
Yeah.
at certain time of the day, it's a long, let me say, at a stop sign there, and the
Yeah, in that area, again, I won't disagree, but I think as we look at the actual growth that's happening in that particular area by South Campus, I think that would certainly be a top priority.
Yeah, but of course, they're gonna build up, but Lake Street is already built.
Yeah, but Derek, if you notice, we got to move 13 houses, and that's going to take a while to get that done. Not disagreeing with you with Lake Street, but Lake Street right now is not in a dying need than what Almond is. I mean, you over there by the schools, and you got 4 schools over there that's going to be building like hotcakes right now. And Lake Street it's already set. All we have to, the funding is not there for that kind of money to go there when you can do 2 projects out of 1. So, I mean, I'm not against Lake Street getting done, but it's not something that's a dying emergency right now. because there's really no growth moving that way like it is out on Alman and Stadium.
And one of the purposes for this meeting is to understand that certain funds are available, and there's only so much time in the day, so to speak. We can't do all projects, and so we want to make sure that staff is completely aware of what our direction is, and so that they can focus on those particular projects. Not that that's off the table, but as far as priority is concerned, we want to make sure that we're on the same page on what we're going to spend our valuable time with.
So with that, I also move that the recommendation of action be approved.
I second.
I just want to make sure that there are no more questions or concerns about the CIP before we move forward. We're all good?
Council Mayor, if I may.
Of course.
Just a couple of points of clarification. And I'm going to be looking at Keith and his team. I just want to capture a couple of key points. It sounds like the council's direction at this point is to move the Almond Avenue study forward. And then at that point, depending on the study, staff will return to the city council for future direction. But at this point, it's for the study of potential alternatives around Almond and Stadium Road. And then previously, Councilmember Hawley had indicated a desire, and it appeared that the council agreed with the Gateway Avenue study to take a look at potential options for the area in front of Rotary Park. And it sounded like I saw a handful of heads nodding to say that that would be appropriate. And so those were the two key ones. There was obviously a lot of other discussion, but in terms of prioritizing, it seems like the council's desire was to take a hard look at those two items this evening. And I'm going to look at the rest of the team.
Yeah, I heard one study was, I think, for Almond Avenue itself, and did I hear that would include Howard and Pine?
That was my intent, yes.
Okay. Also, there was a discussion with regard to study of Stadium Road itself from Pine to, from Howard to Pecan Avenue to look at possible solutions for the congestion that occurs through there.
I think that would be prudent, Keith, to do the whole area.
Keith, would you envision that potentially being a single study by one traffic engineer, just because a lot of the traffic pattern in that area, I'm going to speculate that it's somewhat intertwined.
They will somewhat intertwine, and I think you're exactly right. The recommendations that come out of such a study, or as you work through it, you'll be looking at alternatives in terms of how it works. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put in a median island on the street, or we're going to add additional lanes up and down the street. Those additional things, they represent what's called impedances in the model. If you take away an impedance, it means you're making it easier for traffic to pass through. So as we make it better on Stadium, traffic will flow better. It also may mean more traffic. But you want to know, as a complete picture, what's going to happen to it, or projected to happen to it, as you make all the changes. It's easy to say, I'll put in Almond Avenue, and this is what happens to the traffic, with a model that's not really getting into the details of how you might improve the section of the street. But ultimately, we want to know overall what's going to happen.
Have you considered one-way streets?
That's actually been brought up recently with regard to one-way streets. There was somebody recently talked about doing one-way streets, and it's called a couplet. If you go ahead and do just a couple streets, say you make Stadium one way, one direction, and Pine one way, the other. So the assumption is the traffic goes in whatever direction they need to get to the point. The question is that viable? And I'm not sure that it is.
They did a study on it.
I can go ahead and I can go ahead and consider that, and
Sacramento is, one-way streets,
usually,
quickly,
usually when you do those, it's in a more smaller block situations.
Is that a small block,
That's a little bit larger of a block because it's like a half a mile. It can be done. When I was doing my master's degree in Vegas, I did a couplet for Paradise Road and Koval Lane, I think, and whatever I came up with, it showed the one-way traffic and it worked. And ultimately, later on, they built that into a one-way, and that was fairly large blocks, but they were trying to move lots and lots of traffic. Right now, Pine isn't necessarily there in terms of doing lots and lots of traffic. And by the way, Pine is built to the old standard too. The curb and gutter needs to be pushed back. That's a future project, but it's not on the radar right now. It's a future project. It's an expensive project. The first things we see right now with regard to Pine is we probably need sidewalks. I think he's saying I'm going too long.
You have I'm sorry, Keith, continue.
Sure. The first thing that with Pine is potentially more sidewalks there. We actually have high school students stepping into the street in certain areas, and whether we can fix that or not. We've been, as our projects have been brought forward with council, we've been looking to go ahead and hit the elementary, the younger children's walking routes first. So as projects move forward, we hit the elementary and middle schools, and hopefully we can go ahead and then start moving into high schools.
I haven't noticed any flooding streets lately.
Yeah,
All been fixed?
Phil was able to go ahead and fix that.
Oh, okay.
I forget exactly what he did. John, do you remember? You weren't here when he did something with the. I think it was the panel, the circuit breakers and whatever. He changed something in there, and the pump doesn't shut down anymore, I guess. So not so much flooding. And our master plan actually does include a solution for that if we weren't able to fix the pump problem. That was to go ahead and run a new pipe back to the basin to the east of that. But as long as the pumps are working, we're doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I do have a note here. Sidewalk repairs, lower income areas.
Yes, thank you, Alan.
It was a good note. I didn't remember that.
Yep.
Anything else that staff may have taken down that we didn't get yet? Sounds like a no. Or
I'm just a quick flip through the notes.
So we were going to be looking at streetlights at the future with the May meeting.
Yes, at the May meeting when Angie is here, I think that would probably be the appropriate time. So also so council knows, this is not the only opportunity you'll have on the capital improvement plan. One of the items that this project will come back to the council during the budget. The direction this evening, though, will allow us to take the project before the Planning Commission, simply because it is a state statute that the Planning Commission considers it prior to the council taking formal action. The reason that we wanted to bring it tonight before the city council is to have this dialogue. So anything we present to the Planning Commission, it's not vetted before the council, because the ultimate decision makers in the policy in terms of establishing direction is the city council. So it goes city council, Planning Commission, back to the city council. With that being said, to also know that at any given time, the city council can provide staff with direction. If in 6 months, if there's another item that comes and the council wants to discuss it, the council can direct staff to bring it back. And at that point, we would change direction. However, this does provide the opportunity for us to take a holistic approach and perspective on, and have a very fruitful discussion on the entire program itself.
As long as the majority of the council, through discussion, is in agreement.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for pointing that out. It's obviously the majority of the council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think one thing I want to add to that note in our discussion with CDBG funding is, I mean, this is millions and millions of dollars that we all know these projects do not always run smoothly, and there's always roadblocks and hiccups and things like that. So I think when that happens, it would be beneficial for the council, something as informal as through our city manager, to say, as we're moving forward on these projects, we found out through environmental issues or through some unforeseen circumstances that the project may be delayed. I think it helps us in understanding that if we assume it's a 2-year project and it may be a 2.5-year project, I think it certainly helps us when we talk about CDBG funding and some of these sources that funding's on the table, it's been there for 2 years, why hasn't this been spent yet?
Sure.
We've also known ahead of time now that there's these unforeseen issues.
Yeah, we will be looking to go ahead and put the projects on the books with council's agreement typically for 2 years if we can, and we are going to have discussions with HUD with regard to that. 1 year is a very short time for any kind of capital project. It doesn't matter how complicated or easy it is.
And even in some years, in some cases, even 2 years is not a
Yes.
long time. So I have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the minute order accepting the report and authorizing the submittal of the CIP to the Planning Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Keith, you have an absolute fantastic team. Ellen and Jose and Victor and Frank and Jose.
Well, let me see here. Let me see.
You know, it's kind of like your lips were moving, but I know where the words were coming from.
They have been doing all this.
They made a ventriloquist out.
Anything I say, they will, on any particular thing, they will know it better than me, more than likely, on a more detailed level.
Well, I honestly and sincerely want to say that this is one of my favorite meetings for a number of reasons. One, it's just so informative. It really, really helps the entire council to completely understand that this is a team effort, and it's not just Keith. And when we're talking about the engineering department, we now see the faces of that department that gets things done for us in the community, the unsung heroes. And it really helps us establish a relationship between the two of us, which is so very, very important and vital in getting these things done. So I look forward to having more meetings like this where we can be educated, we can understand better about what our team does for the city of Madera. So thank you all very, very much. And not to be discounted, Tim, thank you very much for your input, and John and Chief for sticking around, and of course, Keith, you did an absolute fantastic job. So I just want to say thank you all very, very much. And I might as well, Arnaldo, you too, and Claudia, did an absolute fantastic job. I can't leave anybody out. I can't leave anybody out. So anyway, I'm terribly sorry. Councilwoman Gallegos.
I just wanted to say that when I first came into the CIPs, it was just knowledge I didn't have. So as new elected officials up here, I'm sure this was really good for them to kind of sink their teeth in, and the information was just wonderfully presented tonight. One thing I want to say too is I want to thank whoever did this, because in the last 3 years I've asked our clerk to make copies, and I get it in a bunch, and it hit the desk one time and it went flying. And if you know, trying to put this in order again was just, and I had tagged it and highlighted it, and it was crazy. So this to me was a gift. And I appreciate
that was your city manager.
I appreciate it so much. This is my 4th CIP manual that I've gotten, and this one is going to stay in place, and it won't be all over the place with me frazzled trying to figure out what comes next. So
Keith is giving me credit, but I didn't actually do a single thing here. And this was Keith and his team.
Jennifer Stickman put it together, but
I was going to say, this is the work of an engineer right here. That's all I wanted to say.
Appreciate it. And the chief for hanging in there to hear all the projects that the city is happening, and spread the word that, you know, we're moving and rocking and rolling in our city now. And that was one thing I had to share with our city manager when we hired him. I said, you know, the county and the Madera Unified School District is just moving, and I feel that we just need some leadership and direction. And I think we have a really good team here across the board, and that people are going to start saying, wow, the city of Madera is moving and good things are coming our way. So thank you, everyone, for spending your evening with us.
I think Chief is upset. We only spent 45 seconds on Measure K.
No, that was fire Measure K.
Councilman Hawley.
Yes. At a later time, I would like to find out if, you know, I asked before about the planning department, the engineering moving over to the RDA building. Hopefully in the near future, you can bring us back an update on when that's going to take place.
Yes, absolutely. We have had I'm going to say extensive discussion at the staff level in terms of when the teams are going to be moving over. I think after last night, we're going to be really hitting the fast forward button on that. One of the tasks that I've challenged staff with is if we were to move over staff immediately, the entire office would be taken up with either personnel or records. And one of the challenges is that I don't want to outgrow the space the day we move in. So one of the items that I've tasked staff with is what can we scan and what can we discard? So we've collectively been working on that. And when I say collectively, that's engineering, that's the planning department, the building department, and our IT department, simply to make sure that when we decide to move over, that we're not taking plans that, quite frankly, that we can scan or that we can discard. And so we are going to be moving that forward. I'll come back with an update, and hopefully we're making that move sooner rather than later. Because if anyone's been back to the engineering department trailer, it's not a nice site. It's in very rough condition.
Very true. We deserve better. Definitely deserve better. I'm not sure if that was all council reports, but I will ask if there's any council reports. Councilman Robinson?
Nothing to report.
Councilwoman Gallegos?
Nothing to report.
I want to thank you for a very informative, thank you, teacher. I really appreciate it tonight. I was fascinated by a lot of the things that you all contributed, and I like that fact that it's not just one person that's going to, basically teach us about the condition of our city, what we're looking at, and how we're moving. So I just really heartfelt to me. Thank you very much for this. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Very good. Very good. Councilman Hawley?
Yes. Just to inform some of you, I have been selected to receive the Tobacco Coalition Award from the Public Health Department on April the 9th at the Board of Supervisors office. So if you would like to come and join in at 10 o'clock, I'll be glad to welcome y'all to watch me receive. It's an award that's done every year throughout the state, as well as throughout the United States. And here in California, they selected one person, and I was chosen to be that person.
Congratulations.
So I just want all of you to know, if you want to come and yahoo and hee-ho with me while I cry to receive this, you're more than welcome. So I'm inviting family and friends and y'all family. So
Awesome. Congratulations. That's fantastic. Well deserved, Mr. Councilman. Mayor Pro Tem Montes.
I just want to say thank you as well to everybody. This is good information. It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's hard to digest, but the explanations that you guys all gave makes it a little bit easier and just comfortable having that information come from you guys. And I'll get better and make sure that I give better input and more input. You guys might not like that next time, but thank you.
That's a lot. Thank you very much. I've said my piece. Again, thank you all very, very much for a lengthy yet very informative evening.